Is this thing on?
Are you ready, Matt?
You're listening to Box Office Bingers
with Matt Diaz and Ernesto Santos.
Good evening, folks. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Box Office Bingers.
And the only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good dump.
He's my friend. I don't have friends. I got family.
I can do this all day.
You know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Box Office Bingers. Ernesto, tell our little listeners why we are here today, who we have with us here today, and other things that brought us here today.
Well, Matt, here is the movie we are reviewing. I didn't think a better way to segue that. You really threw me off. So, thank you. We have Sheldon Dutes, sir. Thank you so much for coming back. And we are reviewing Here from writer, director, and stars of Forrest Gump. Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Paul Bettany in Forrest Gump? He wasn't in Forrest Gump, was he?
No, he was not. Just
Tom Hanks, and Robin Wright. But it's also Paul Bettany and Kelly Riley, written and directed by Oscar winner Robert Zemeckis. He wrote the Back to the Future trilogy, Forrest Gump, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway, The Polar Express, and Flight. Also written by Oscar winner Eric Roth, who wrote Forrest Gump, The Postman, Ali, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, A Star is Born, Dune Part 1, and Killers of the Flower Moon. So, sir, I'm very excited to have you back on the show. We're going to be talking about Mr. Zemeckis, and in this, I almost want to call this movie like an experiment. For what they try to achieve. It's just something different. We get this family drama, but it's using this stationary camera throughout the entire film except for one shot. So later on we're gonna be reviewing that. We're gonna be talking about what you're watching. But at first, Sheldon, we want to catch up with you, sir. What have you been up to and how you been?
First of all, I want to say that I'm so happy to be here for a third time with the Box Office Bingers, and I don't ever want to leave this place because here is so amazing. But no, I kid. If anybody who's seen the movie yet, they'll get some of those references. I tried to piggyback off of what Matt was doing. No, I'm glad to be here with you guys this afternoon. It's always great to see Matt. Ernesto, I get to see you every day, which is always very nice. But I feel like on Mondays we get to recap what we're talking about from the weekend. But today I was like, no, I'm going to wait until we get on the call to talk about this show. So, I'm just so excited to be here with you guys for the third time. And, looking forward to talking about what you guys are watching because you guys are always on top of the pulse. So I can then add that to my list.
So then, besides the stuff that you've been working on, watching, can you talk to us about some of the stuff you've been working on? I know you've got this event coming up. You've also are currently training to run the OUC Half Marathon again last year. So is your plan to beat your speed from the year before? You're trying to beat your time from last year?
I mean, that's the hope, that's the goal, but we'll see what happens. I am back, yes, training for the Orlando Half Marathon right now. It's December 7th. And I started training in early September and gradually kind of increasing my mileage each week. So this past Saturday, I ran 12 miles, and then I ran 12 miles the weekend before. I'm no stranger to these long distance races and so forth, but I'm getting older and my body's telling me to slow down, but here I am back for more punishment for another year. So my goal is to beat my time from last year, but at this point, I just want to feel good about finishing. That's kind of been my new measurement of success is how I feel, not so much what the time is.
What's your drive there? Why participate in these marathons?
It's something that I've kind of always been interested in since I started doing my first road race when I was, I believe, 24. It started with a 10K, a 6-mile race. And what I like about training for these races is that it kind of keeps me accountable with myself. I set this goal and then I incrementally start working towards it. And that's what keeps me coming back every time. But it's addictive in that moment. And then you get that runner's high and you're like, I'm going to do this again. And then your knees and your stamina remind you that maybe you should pick up cycling or swimming or something else. So we'll see. I'm enjoying it, but also open to seeing like what other hobbies I can start to segue to as I look to a milestone birthday next year.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I have probably to running to a marathon is when I'm running late to the movie, and then I have to sprint through the parking lot just to get there in time. But other than that, I commend you, sir, because I could not ever think about even running a marathon. But I give people all the praise who wants to put in the work and to do this activity and to have the self-fulfillment of, reaching a goal. I know that's a lot of thing, and that's a lot about it. And I've seen a couple of people on YouTube who like share their journeys about running marathons, and it seems fulfilling, and I like to watch it from my couch. But I don't think I can actually participate in it. Maybe that could change when I, and down the line.
You never know. I just heard a story recently about a woman who just did Disney's Wine and Dine half marathon, and she picked up running after her second kid was born, and she won the race this past weekend.
Wow.
So she ran 13 miles in an hour and 22 minutes, and it was her first time picking up running. This was her first time getting into it.
That's insane.
So you never know what you don't know. She probably didn't think that she was a runner either, and then here she is, literally breaking records.
Yeah, maybe if I ever get to that point. I know, Ernesto, you said you wanted to do a marathon.
I did a half marathon. I did a half marathon in 2018. It was the Disney's Wine and Dine. It was a great experience. I had a great time. Like, I didn't set any. My goal was just to finish, because I was like, I don't even know if I can do this thing, but let me just see if I could at least cross the finish line. And I was like, now I think I could totally see myself doing it again. I'm a little nervous because since then I've had knee surgery, but I'd be totally open to doing it again.
Well, come join us. Yes, it'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna be working. Unfortunately,
I know that's the other thing. I appreciate it.
He will be there.
I'll be there.
He will be there.
I'll be there supporting the station.
Who else are you running it on your own, or you have other people running it with you?
So Sonica is running it. Sonica Donge, who's my co-anchor at the local TV station here in Orlando, and then our evening anchor Stuart Moore. He's also running it. So we have three of us running it. Stuart's looking forward to marking a milestone birthday right the weekend of this race. Mm-hmm. So each of us are kind of, different motivations for why we're doing it, but it'll be fun to run it with two other colleagues, including my co-anchor.
Do you? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to just ask, do you think is your training harder this year than it has been in previous years, just because you feel like you are getting up there in an older age? Even though, I say that, but you're extremely fit,
Oh. You're too kind. I will say this year, I've kind of been tweaking what I've been doing because I did not like the way I felt last year. That's the biggest thing. When I was talking to you about how I felt. So this year, I've been trying to be intentional about not eating too heavy on Friday nights because I'm not 26. Because back in the day, I could eat pizza and beer and then go run an 8:20 mile. That's not happening now. That's not even anywhere close. So I've been eating lighter on Friday nights, and then during my long runs on Saturday, I've just kind of been going back to the basics, things that I've been steering away from over the years. So running with caffeine gels and energy gels because they've got the perfect combination of sugar, caffeine, and carbohydrates in these energy packs. So using those on those runs, running with water, and these are things that I kind of deviated away from since moving back to Florida. So I'm just trying to get back to basics by incorporating that. And I will say, I have been feeling a little bit better about these longer runs now that I've been a little bit more intentional about the training.
Sounds like your years of experience are setting you up for really great training this time around.
Yeah, no, knock on wood. I have a running group that I meet with on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and we do speed workouts, and we kind of hold each other accountable for these different speed workouts. So I would never do these speed workouts on my own. Yeah. And I think that's also helping me is that I'm kind of accountable to the group, and we'll do these runs together and keep track, and we'll kind of shout each other out on social media and so forth. So that's been helpful too, is having that group dynamic as well.
Yeah, awesome. It definitely sounds like, the community aspect of it is definitely a big motivator. Because you can do everything by yourself and everything, but when you have, the right motivation around you and you're surrounded by the people who want to help you reach your goal, then that makes the experience a lot better. And also I like how each person that you're probably training with are going to have a different story. They're all doing it for different reasons, but at the end of the day, the goal is more or less the same. It's like you either want to finish or do a better time. The goals are almost similar, but it's nice to have that community around you when you are, doing this very physical thing.
1000%. And another thing that I love that keeps me coming back race after race is race day culture, which is very different from like anything, just because everyone is so hyped up and energized / nervous, and you've got these spectators there that are along the course. And Ernesto, I know you've run a half marathon, but like that feeling of like just the culture around race day is a lot of fun, and that in itself is kind of addictive.
You're so right, because I remember being at the OUC last year, and everybody who was there, they're like, you know what? I'm going to run a half marathon. Like everybody there was just feeling the vibes of like everybody like passing the finish line. Like it's infectious. Like you see these people after that face when they cross the finish line, and you see like the fulfillment, the joy, and it's just like all your worries just kind of wash away. Like everything they were stressed out about, it just kind of washes away the second they cross that line. Like it's very infectious to everybody else who's there. Like I've heard like 10 people go, "Oh, I'm gonna run next year. Oh, I'm running next year." Like this makes me want to run.
It's very inspiring, just the whole vibes of that day. So, Matt, to kind of roundabout answer your question, that's kind of one of the things that keeps me coming back.
Yeah, inspiration. Yeah, of course, that makes a complete sense. Yeah. And just tell everybody again when this race is happening, if they want to go out to support you or others, and almost everybody except for Stuart, which that's another problem. That's another problem we have to get into, because Stuart has not been on the podcast. I'm not sure. Really? He has never been on the podcast before, so that's something we have to hound him down for. But Sonic has been on multiple times. Okay. But yeah, it's so with that though. If anyone wants to support you, the people at the station or others out there just looking for a good time during the day, when is it again?
Yeah, it's happening December 7th at Lake Eola. That's the first Saturday in December. Track Shack has a lot more details about signing up, because people can still register. And if anybody did like the Wine and Dine race this past weekend, or if they're running any of like the half marathons that are happening like down in South Florida, because they just had one. There's one in Cocoa Thanksgiving weekend. They're already trained, so they can sign up. Anybody who's listening, who's maybe like to that point of their training or already run. So love to see you guys out there, either on the course or participating in the race in some capacity. So trackshack.com has more details.
There you go. And that's awesome. Another thing we want to talk about is that you are on the board of the Adult Literacy League. Yes. And looks like there's an event coming up soon with that as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So we service Central Florida adult learners, and it's incredible because like 1 in 5 adults in Central Florida are reading at or below a 5th grade reading level. So the Adult Literacy League, our mission is to provide these adult learners with the tools and resources that they need to succeed. So a lot of times the adult learners are not able to help their kids with their homework or to read a lease or mortgage agreement because their comprehension and their reading level is not at a high school level. So we raise money to provide tutoring and free resources for them to get up to grade level or high school level with their reading. So at the beginning of December 2nd, we have our annual fundraiser. It's called Reading Between the Lines. And I'm on the board, and I've also served as the MC for this event for the past few years. And I'm excited to be back for year 4, I believe this is, since I moved back to Orlando. So I'm super excited. Well, year 4 that I participated in some capacity, my 3rd year as a MC. But this year, I'll be speaking with our keynote speaker, Lauren Groff. She's a New York Times bestselling author. I'm excited to read her book. That's part of my research and getting ready for that conversation the night of the event. But she's the main focal point of the event. And so many people come out. She's got a big following on Book Talk. I'm on, but not on TikTok. But anyway, I'm excited to read her book and interview her for the audience. She's super popular right now. And yeah, we've got her books pulled up there in the chat so you guys can see them.
Yeah, how does it feel to be part of this group, be on the board? Because I know that, it sounds like it's a lot going on there. Yeah. So how does it feel like, because you said you were were you a part of it first? Were you emceeing it and then you were on the board shortly after?
No, so I started off as a tutor and a board member, And then they were like, "Oh, you work in broadcasting." They're like, "Would you help us out emceeing our event?" And I said, "Sure." I joined the board to help out however I can. And yeah, they had me do it in 21, 22, and now 2024. This past year, our colleague Christina Watkins did it in 2023. So it still stayed in the Wesh family, but I helped out with a little bit more of the coordinating behind the scenes last year because there was an all-female author panel. So it was kind of nice to have like a female MC to kind of like guide that conversation. But education has opened so many doors for my family, and my parents are from the Caribbean. They've instilled a value of education in me and my siblings, and I want other people to have access to those same opportunities because it just helps each subsequent generation the more informed someone is. So it's a bit of a passion project, and it helps me to kind of keep going, through all of the craziness.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a passion project because obviously the name passion, if you're passionate about something, you will be able to, put in all your efforts into making something. And this is also just a great cause. So, so I hope the event goes well. And,
Thank you. I hope so too.
Throughout the years, you've been still a part of it for so long. So, do you have is this event typically packed?
Yeah, it gets pretty busy because the authors, and thankfully we've been fortunate enough, at least the years that I've been part of this organization, we've had New York Times bestselling authors. So that's kind of like the big draw for people. But we have so many wonderful sponsors with like our local businesses here in Central Florida that sponsor this event. So there's sometimes an allure around it, which very much helps us with our fundraising goals. And then people have an opportunity to get inspired. I talked about being inspired at the half marathon, but this annual event is really inspiring also because we hear so many compelling stories from our instructors, from our adult learners about what brought them to the league. And you can't hear stories like that and not want to get involved in some capacity. So people leave this event every year either making a donation to the cause or volunteering or helping out in whatever way that they're able to dedicate their time, their talent, or their treasure.
Right. And so more or less make sure people are buying tickets sooner rather than later is what I'm saying.
Yes, please. adultliteracyleague.org. We've got more information there. I'll also post more contacts on my socials as well. But if you can't make it to the event, it's in Orlando at the Orlando Science Center, which is a wonderful, cool venue. And I'm so grateful that they're having us back this year because they hosted our annual board retreat, which yours truly coordinated. So I'm glad that they've been a wonderful partner and friend of the Adult Literacy League. And yeah, December 2nd, it's a Monday. I know that you guys have a wide reach with this podcast. So if people are not in the Central Florida area, we take donations, and I always tell people no amount is too small. Like if you're comfortable giving $5, that's $5 that can help a student in need.
Yeah, and also, this is a great cause. Mainly, we're mainly a movie podcast, but a lot of these stories that are based off of just these books, and so it's really important to hear these stories because I'm sure. I'm not a big reader, but I'm as Ernesto and myself, we're audiobooks.
Give yourself some credit. You still absorb information from books. Like you'll sit there and listen to somebody tell you a book. It's not the same exact thing as sitting down and reading, but you're still absorbing the information. I say it counts some for the most part.
I'm not physically reading, but yes, you're right. But what I love about it too is that there's we are kind of transported into a different world every time we start a movie, but there are so many more books out there that, you know what I mean? It's like, there's so many books out there that we can be even further down the line of it all. And then half of those books are then turned into the movie. And as we already know, Ernesto, the book is probably better than the movie half the time anyway.
That's usually the first couple sentences after I compare both medias. It's always the movie was good, but the book was definitely better. It usually is that way because you have more space for the medium to breathe and explore. You don't have the constraints of a movie or a miniseries or a TV show.
1000% agree. And Matt, it's interesting that you talk about the transportative power that books have, but movies have that as well, as you mentioned, and I'm on the board for United Arts of Central Florida as well. And that's one of the reasons why I'm on that board, because I do think that arts and culture have a way of helping us kind of understand experiences that we may not get to experience firsthand. And that opens your eyes and your mind to all these experiences and concepts and things that you would not have known otherwise. So it's all connected, literature, the arts, pop culture, TV, movies, like it all comes full.
We just love stories.
And especially with how smart, especially how smart movies and TV have become. I think it's equivalent of like a book too.
And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because that's one of the reasons why it's kind of like the foundation of this podcast in a way, but also one of the reasons why we started doing our foreign film of the month. We were so moved when we were transported into the film Parasite that came out a few years ago, back in 2019.
Yeah.
And when Bong Joon-ho accepted the Oscar, he said, and the line still speaks to me today, and it's so true, is that once you get past the 1-inch border on the bottom of your screen, you can unlock a whole different world of cinema. And to me, that was like mind blowing, of just like a short sentence to say that. And then now throughout, the almost 5 years we've been doing this podcast, we try to devote an episode a month to a foreign film, and we try to pick different countries. And then also now with the Oscar season, there's a lot of them that are nominated too. So we do a big effort to try to make sure that we are talking about every one of those movies too. And it's incredible to be transported into the world. But like, there's so much more out there. Like, you can stick to American cinema, and that's perfectly fine. But if you just want a little bit more, that's when, some people would just dive into, like I said, the foreign film. Some people dive into animes. And if you want even more than that, then you have the books.
Yeah.
So,
all connected. Love it.
All connected. Storytelling is key here, and it makes you emotional too, to say the least. But yeah, Sheldon, it sounds like you're doing a lot of great stuff here. You're keeping yourself busy, that's for sure.
Yes.
But with that, we want to dive into a segment that we have not been in a while. We have not done in a while, which is Whatcha Watchin. So David, who is a listener, I know this is your favorite segment, and it's been a while since we've done these, so we apologize, but rest assured, we're back at it again. So Sheldon, we'll start with you. What have you been watching?
Okay, so I am on a mission right now to watch a couple TV shows that I feel like are always in the conversation that people are talking about. And I'm a 90s kid. I love that decade, and I'm now at an age where I can look back wistfully and nostalgically for a time when I was younger. But anyway, everybody talks about Friends. Everybody talks about The West Wing. And there are I just feel like it comes up quite a bit. And I wanted to see what the big deal is, because I'd seen a handful of episodes of Friends, but I was in that camp where it's the most popular episodes that tend to air on syndication. So I'm watching it from start to finish. I started it last November with season 1, and here we are in November, a year later, and I'm on season 9, 10 seasons of the show. So I'm almost finished with Friends. I just started The West Wing, so that's kind of like old school stuff that I'm currently watching.
Okay, hold on. Let's get to Friends. Okay. So you've watched 9 out of 10 seasons of Friends.
Yes.
Okay. Of old school network TV. So it's like each season's 23, 24 episodes.
Yeah, that's why it's taking me
Okay. So when did you start
last
this?
November last year, Thanksgiving time around.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So we're wrapping things up. So I'm going to assume, right? This was okay, I've never seen Friends before. I'm doing the deep dive. It's been over almost a year now since you started it, probably watching on and off. Is this more of this I like this show and I'm going to continue watching it? Or is it more of a mission to see it through the end? And how is your Friends journey so far? Because I have never seen Friends.
Same.
You've seen a couple of episodes, references here or there, a couple of clips online, but never, I don't think I actually sat down and watched a full episode. So how is that journey going through time working for you?
So far, so good for the most part. Okay, so I have to back it up just a little bit. I started watching episodes reruns on Nick at Night and on TBS during the pandemic, just because I just needed something that was kind of formulaic and familiar. But then I was okay, I don't really think this is funny. I want to find out why everybody thinks that this show is the best show. What's so funny about it? So I said, okay, let me start from start to finish and watch it. I am a sucker for any type of setting in New York City, whether it's a book, a TV show, a movie, and then if it's New York in the 90s, I mean, you're like next level, you're up there.
Yeah.
So like, it was checking off all the boxes for me, and I wanted to dive in. So going into the show, like, I knew that Lisa Kudrow's character, for me, and the episodes that I had seen, Lisa Kudrow was funny, and I thought she was the only funny one to me. And everyone's, naming off all these other characters. And I was like, no, they're not doing it for me. And I said, am I missing something? Let me watch this from start to finish. Here I am, almost done with the show. I still think Lisa Kudrow is the only funny one. So. And I know, like, Matthew Perry, like, had a loyal following. And I will say, like, I do appreciate, like, his witty quips from time to time, but I don't know, I don't LOL like when I watch the show. Like, I'm not like laughing out loud. Like, and when I do, it's with like Phoebe, which is Lisa Kudrow's character.
I always view this as like a show of its time. I think like maybe it's so 90s that it's almost like I can't go back and watch it for the first time and enjoy it. Whereas I feel like people who watch it, like they either watched it when it aired or like immediately after when it went into syndication. But I have also, like, everybody raves about it, but I just don't see the appeal. It just doesn't seem, I don't even want to say, maybe realistic is the word I want to use. Like, it just doesn't seem like, I don't know. It doesn't seem representative at all.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was gonna, kind of picking off of what Ernesto said, there, to me, there also has been no appeal to watching this show. It does feel like a product of its time. So it's kind of interesting to hear that you are still not. Well, are you invested?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I might as well finish.
No, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know. Like, I've had this theory about network television for a long time, and I think most of these shows could have been wrapped up like around their fourth season. And I've said this for years, like, most network TV shows like lose their luster after the fourth season. And even if it goes on to last 10 seasons, whatever the case may be, you talk to somebody who had a favorite TV show that was on network, they will probably name episodes from the first 4 seasons. And after that, like, I feel like the characters become caricatures of themselves. And then it becomes so like predictable and formulaic, even though the plot lines, I don't know, just for me, it doesn't move. But like, I was a big fan of Will and Grace back in the day, and I watched that from start to finish after it aired on TV on the DVD box set because like 2010. But I was like, oh, this was good for the first 4 seasons. And then I started noticing that trend with other TV shows. And I don't know if you guys have picked up on this too, but like, if there's any network TV shows that you watch, like, they probably were the best their first 4 seasons.
I don't know. I have a tendency. I kind of agree with you, and I think that extends not only to network TV, but even just series in general. Like, after a while, it's like, all right, well, at this point, you should have wrapped up the premise of your series. So, like, unless you're seeking a new adventure, like, it's just like regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm more inclined to agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, really, you were talking about the shift in television. Now it's unheard of if any show can get past even season 5 or 6 that's not already on the air. Like you really don't see. It's rare that probably season 4 or 5 is probably your limit. Most shows nowadays barely get past the second season. Some get axed 2 weeks after the season airs. Which is crazy to think about, because some shows need to breathe just a little bit in order for you to like see what your audience are. But in the age of streaming, it's just crazy how much shows just like after the first season just get cut. And then for us as watching, it's like, well, I guess it wasn't that good because it's cut and there's not going to be any more. So why am I going to invest my time into watching a show that's not going to continue furthering on unless it's a limited series, and that's completely different. But most streaming shows, I think we're also leaning on limited series, but then you also have the ones that are like, okay, these are good. And like some of the shows that are really, really good, like in my opinion, like Schitt's Creek and Ted Lasso. Schitt's Creek only lasted about 5 seasons or so. And they decided to end it because the story, they didn't want to keep going. They knew that this was going to be over, and the same for Ted Lasso, 3 seasons and that's it. But then you have shows like Friends and How I Met Your Mother and The Office and Parks and Rec and Big Bang Theory, and the list can go on and on, of these shows of the product of the early 2000s and 90s that once they realized that people are going to show up to watch this show, that's it. that's the goal for the network, is to make sure that people are tuning in on Thursday night because they like these characters. And there's a certain point where the story doesn't matter anymore. Because you're coming in anyway to watch the people, less about the story. And then you might be surprised about a certain episode here or there that, kind of stands above the rest. But after that, the show is going to stick around so the ratings are no longer there. And then eventually they're going to be like, well, I guess we're going to end it. Then the ratings shoot back up for the finale, and then that's it.
But that's a really interesting observation, Matt, because I would say, as we're talking, I would say that The Office is an exception, I would think is an exception to what Sheldon was saying. Only because the season 7 is when Steve Carell left, and I feel like at that point, that's when that show started to, I don't even want to say go downhill, because I still enjoyed the latter seasons, but not as much as the seasons when Stephen Carell was. But a lot of it was just him being him on that show. He carried the main weight, the load of why people watched.
Yeah, and even with that, that's actually a really good point. When a main character leaves, I think you have to ask yourself, is it worth keeping the show around to watch it fall, potentially? Some shows can come back from that. Others do not. And so, if your main character leaving is probably one of the reasons why people are showing up, why continue the show? Because that's one of the reasons why you came in. And then you have this awkward time. Is well, is it going to be good without Steve Carell? Can the other cast members hold up its own weight? Even we're looking at now, it's for example, in a different context, but Henry Cavill. I never watched the show The Witcher, but in my opinion, it's why would you continue the show when your main character, Henry Cavill himself, is no longer in there? Yeah. Then you said, well, Liam Hemsworth is good enough. It's no, I'm sorry.
Not the same thing.
He's not. He's not the same thing. And then they said, oh, well, after that season, it's over. But then what's the point? What was the point of doing all this? If you might as well just end it with Henry Cavill. Yeah. Even going back to Big Bang Theory, it would be really weird if all of a sudden Sheldon decided to, the character Sheldon, not you, Sheldon Cooper, decided to leave the show. And they were like, well, we're going to try to make it work without him. It's I don't know. I think Jim Parsons is a pretty big character in the show that, that's one of the reasons why people show up for it. So I can only imagine if anyone from Friends, from this main cast, decided to leave and they decided to continue the show, And
I think that's why the network probably paid them as much as they did, because they had if you kind of look at their bargaining, it was collective bargaining. They all went in and they were okay, we're all going to get paid X amount of money per episode, and it's going to go across the board. And it's a little mini union that they had formed for that show. But if any one of them left, I think it would totally take away from that dynamic. But it is interesting. I grew up on TV. That's what I know more than movies. But you watch these different sitcoms, and I would watch sitcoms even for shows that I just had a passive interest in. Yep. But they would replace the mom or a sibling. On Roseanne, they replaced the sister midway through the season, and then brought the original sister back, and I'm just what is it? And it was just there. And then on Three's Company with Suzanne Summers and John Ritter in the 70s, same thing. Suzanne Summers left the show for some reason, and then they had somebody else come on, and it was another blonde woman, and I was this is not interchangeable. This is not. And then the mom on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is my ultimate pet peeve of and the first Aunt Viv was the best Aunt Viv, and I mean no shade to the second actress, I don't remember her name, but Janice Hubert, who played the original Aunt Viv, is always going to be the Aunt Viv.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I feel some characters your core cast is unreplaceable, but then, the show must go on, I guess, in a way. But it just feels weird once especially in a TV series. In a movie, it feels a little bit less weird. Yeah. Because maybe some people don't want to come back for the sequel, and there's a lot of into that, and that's fine, I guess. I don't like it, but it's fine. Yeah. But when you have a TV series that's been running for so long, and you think, people are not going to notice, we're going to notice.
Yes.
It's how dumb do you think we are?
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, my God. 1,000%.
Well, thank you for sharing your friend's journey. You're not making me want to watch the show anymore.
Here's the thing. I think give a season a chance, because there are a lot of jokes that I feel come into play in pop culture, and it's I will say the characters are very endearing. And that's part of its allure too, because I will say, like, over the course of like, the 9 seasons where I'm at so far, like they fleshed each of them out in a way that like I'm like, okay, I can see where people feel like this like affinity and connection to them. So in that regard, yes, it is brilliant that they've done that. I just only think that like 1 or 2 of the castmates are funny, but yeah.
Okay, so with that, another show you mentioned was The West Wing.
Yes.
And you said you had just started. How far are you in there? And this is also of a high prestigious. What's the word?
Prestigious.
Thank you. Show by Aaron Sorkin, and kind of put him on the map, and kind of put also HBO. Like that was one of their flagship shows at the time.
So I was a big fan of The Newsroom when it was on HBO with Aaron Sorkin, and I only had like kind of like a passing knowledge about The West Wing. Like I remember like it being on TV, but like it just wasn't a show that I ever thought I would watch. Mm-hmm. And I was at a leadership conference. I'm a member of Leadership Florida, and some of my classmates were talking about The West Wing. And I said, you know what? I was a fan of The Newsroom, but they're like, you have to watch this show. Everybody said it's like such good writing. And I do appreciate Sorkin's writing on The Newsroom. So that's what kind of led me to The West Wing. But this one is a true investment because this is like old school network TV, like hour-long episodes, and there's like 23 episodes per season. So this is going to take me a little bit longer to finish. I'm only a few episodes into the first season, and it's still growing on me, but I think they're just kind of developing some of the plot lines and the characters. But I mean, all-star cast, like Martin Sheen is in it, Allison Janney, Rob Lowe, a few other actors who I don't know their name, but like they've been in other like movies and TV shows. So that in itself, like the acting and the writing is really good, and I'm enjoying it to that point. But like it hasn't like the claws aren't all the way in yet, but I'm going to continue watching.
Yeah, it's very interesting to start a show and that it's with high praise, but yet you're not there yet.
Yeah.
And I've had that experience many times when like, hey, this show is good, and then you're a few in is like, when?
Yeah.
When is
this gonna happen?
And unfortunately, in some cases, like I think going back to sitcoms, you have The Office, where a lot of people say just skip the first season. And it's like, well, I can't skip the first season because it's the first season. If it was the first season, then it would be the second season. Then I can't just start on the second season. But like you have like the grace period of a show that you have to kind of, but maybe even sit through in order to see where it gets good to find their footing. And I think that's also just a great example of like some shows don't find their footing until the second or third season, and that's when they become a classic. So when now in today's age, when they just cut it after the first season, it's like, well, it had potential. You just don't let it grow long enough, and it all comes back to ratings and whatnot. But I had this problem with Arrested Development, and I had this problem with.
Well, that's one of my favorite shows.
It took me season 3 to like. To me, like one episode in season 3, I was like, oh, I get it now. This is funny.
Yes, it's hilarious. But because it took me 3 tries to get into Arrested Development. Like,
okay,
I had to get through the first like 4 episodes multiple times, and then once I got through those first few episodes, like I was in. But like, Arrested Development is very much like my type of like comedy and the type of show that I like because it's in the same vein as like 30 Rock, Parks and Rec. Like that's my wheelhouse. So, but it did take me a little while to get into it, but not multiple seasons.
Yeah, no, Parks and Rec for me was like end of season 2 when it clicked. But like that's the thing though. Like I was willing to give it the time to see if I can get there because it was such in high regard. Like it was high praise on a show. And I think some people don't give it the time of day. Another show that sometimes we talk about, Ernesto loves, is Rick and Morty. Yeah. I cannot get through these episodes. And no matter how hard I've tried it twice now, and it's just like it's just not for me. And everyone's like, well, you love Back to the Future. It's like basically the same thing. It's like I'm waiting for it because I'm not feeling it.
I think like Back to the Future is an overstatement. I would say that it has elements that refer to Back to the Future, like certain aspects of it, but it's mainly like it's like a love letter to movies because like they in like culture and stuff like because they'll take a movie theme and then that'll be like the theme of the episode and it's usually related to like some sort of movie or something, and that's how. So good.
It's crazy because Dan Harmon was part of Community, and I love Community for doing the exact same thing.
Yes.
But yet, when it comes to Rick and Morty, I can't get past that.
Is it
that
the animation?
For some reason. It might be the animation of it all, because I'm not a huge fan of that style of it. But it's. I will try again at some point in the future, maybe within, don't quote me, within 5 years.
Okay. Damn. Guess I'll ask you again in 5 years.
Yeah, when we hit our 10-year anniversary, let's revisit this conversation again.
No, but Rick and Morty, like, to me, it just felt so obviously like Back to the Future-esque. Yes. But like, even though I've never seen an episode of Rick and Morty, but just what little bits I've seen, I'm just like, oh, this guy's totally, Christopher Lloyd's character. What was his name? Yeah. Doc something?
Doc Brown.
Doc Brown is, yeah.
Yeah, even down to just like the lab coat and the hair and whatnot. But and Ernesto kind of helped me with hacks, because I would come in like every couple of weeks and I'm like, I don't think this show is good. And Ernesto's like, keep watching it, give it a shot. And I'm so glad I listened to him, because it did grow on me.
Yeah, hacks for me, like that's another great example. Some shows hit you on episode 1. Like, that is just like, oh, I understand the vibe, I understand what we're doing, and Hacks was one of those for me. It's like, it's not a show that I would typically gravitate toward, but it was around the Emmy season that was getting all the awards, and we're like, oh, we should probably give it a shot. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Ernesto and I started the show at the same time without talking to each other about it.
Yeah.
And so it was around the same vein of like, oh, it's getting a lot of award attention, let's give it a look. And then I ended up really, really enjoying it for what it was. And now I'm here for every season that comes down. So I'm surprised that you did not have that same affection for the show at the beginning.
I had to push him.
I
had to push him.
Yeah, the rest of it. Literally, because I would come in and I was just like, I made it through like the first season, and he's like, keep going, and I'm like,
what?
I mean, thankfully there's only like 7 or 8 episodes per season, so like it's not too crazy. But I thought the acting was great. Like, I'm a big fan of Jean Smart. I remember watching reruns of Designing Women when I was a kid. I loved her in Garden State. I just feel like she has been a character actress of kind of the last few decades. She's kind of just always been around and been in the conversation. So she was like the allure for me, but it took me a while for the main actress to grow on me.
Hannah Einbinder,
if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. But it wasn't until the introduction of Kayla did I really, the office assistant, that it really started to come around, because I would laugh, obnoxiously laughing when Kayla was have her scenes and so forth, just because she was so cringy and awkward, but she does it so well. And then you start getting invested in the characters, and you're kind of invested and interested in their story arc, and that continued to grow. So I'm excited to see what comes with the next season. But Ernesto, thank you for getting me the push that I needed to keep.
It's definitely worth the watch.
You're caught up now.
Yeah.
You are good.
It's funny that you said that season 3, that's most recently, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's crazy that you said that Kayla was your entry point, and that's for me. That's the one that's I don't care for this character.
I think Kayla's hilarious. I think she's so. I love how just the kind of same on Sheldon's same vein. I just love how cringy and just how self-unaware she is. She just walks and she just says the craziest shit.
She's so inappropriate and out of pocket all the time, but she doesn't know that she's being that way.
Yes, so oblivious, just living in her own world.
But I will say a testament to the great writing on this show. Even though a character like Kayla might feel a little one note, she's the Gen Z office assistant who's just there for comic relief. But I believe it was its most recent season where she reconnected with a childhood friend who was really mean to her and just so stank. But yet she put up with it because she wanted to prove herself in the agency to close that deal. And it just kind of showed how multidimensional that character is and the writing on the show. So I really appreciated that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Yeah. Another show with high praise, and I'm also curious about your thoughts on this, is The Bear. So
how comedy, non-comedy?
The comedy, non-comedy that keeps winning for a comedy that's not a comedy.
But it is a comedy.
It's not funny. It's not funny.
Do you like the show?
I do like the show, but it's not funny. Like it is well written. I appreciate the story arcs. Like I love like the way that they are exploring the backstories and motivations for so many of these characters. But like I don't laugh in this show. I don't know what's funny about high stress situations. I don't know what's funny about family drama. I don't know what's funny about family trauma. Like it's not funny to me. But I think it is an exquisite piece of like good TV writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I can agree with you on the comedy, and you know that I feel like that is a whole separate topic that should not be taken away from the actual show itself.
Yeah.
Like I think maybe a comedy is a better fit for them in the award season, but we all know what
I think it's more that than anything, because if it was listed as a straight drama, what would have been up against? Like The Crown, Game of Thrones, Succession. Like you wouldn't even be hearing about The Bear in comparison to those other shows.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it as a comedy, then it's like a top tier. It is more like a dramedy, but it's more of a dramedy, like more of a mixed element. I'm kind of 50-50 on the drama and comedy, because there are a lot of comedic elements that they play in even in the dark moments.
So I will say this. I think that this show too, like, has done like a good job of like kind of mainstreaming the conversation about mental health, because like so many of and I don't think that's what they're trying to do, or like I don't think that's its mission, but like I watch this show and every episode I'm like, oh wow, this is interesting to see the way that people's mental health journeys have taken a toll on how they behave and react in the workplace. And I only came to that conclusion because they've done such a good job of kind of exploring like what people are dealing with outside of the kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I mean, like you mentioned this earlier, but their storytelling is superb on this show. Like the characters, and I think that's what we're seeing now, and maybe hopefully more shows will get into, is like we are giving time to focus on characters. That's why we're here. And so instead of like in the sense of friends that we have, like we have this core group of people and we're just here to just follow them throughout all these different shenanigans. And a show like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that is pretty much its whole premise, is like we're here for those 5 people and the story really doesn't matter. We just want just plop them in a spot and then see what other crazy antics they can get into. And that's pretty much the show. But there's always something that we can have, these character-driven episodes that solely focus on 1 or 2 people, and then see how that fits on the overarching story. And a show we're not going to be talking about in this episode, but we're going to be wrapping things up next week, is our coverage on The Penguin. And that is a great example of like you have these strong characters and then they make them stronger, and then it makes you more invested into the story that they're telling. And I feel like we should be getting more shows like that focus on these characters, so that when the show hits a high, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be action based, but when the tensions build because we've invested into the characters, and then when the story decides to elevate, that's when all of a sudden the stakes are very high, because we know what that means for each individual person. And so I think The Bear has done that very well. And Sheldon, I know it not be your cup of tea, but I highly recommend watching The Penguin.
So it's funny you guys say that, because actually a friend of mine who I want to introduce you guys to, because I think she'd be great for the pod, because between Box Office Bingers and y'all's Instagram accounts and her Instagram accounts, like you guys are all watching the same stuff at the same time, so I'm like, they need to just meet. So if you guys ever need a guest for like something that's kind of niche, like she's your woman. So I will gladly make that connection. But I say all that to say, she just posted something on her Instagram story this morning about this being like one of her favorite shows right now. Yeah, and incredible. Then Kristen Milotti, she was on another podcast that I listened to, and I thought her interview was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed her as an actress. I didn't know that she was in the show. So between Matt's ringing endorsement just now, my friend, and then Kristen's interview on what was it? Keep It. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I need to check it out. So I'm willing to step out my genre zone for a good show.
Like you could even separate the fact that it's a DC comic book. Like you don't even like you could watch it, you would never even know that unless you would just recognize the name. They're like, oh, they said Gotham. Like, isn't Gotham part of Batman? Like, that would be the only connection that you have. It's just certain name dropping things. But it is like a pure just crime drama. Like Colin Farrell's best role he's ever done. The amount of work that he did for his prosthetics. I mean, Christine Milioti, she reinvigorated this character. Like, she took this villain character and she has elevated it to like this unspeakable level. Like, it is crazy how good this show is.
And I have seen Batman Returns, or is that is that the one with the Penguin?
Yes, Batman Returns is the one with the Penguin.
Not related to this.
Not related to
this. This is the Robert Pattinson Batman universe.
Wait, are they not part of like DC like overall?
It is, but this is considered like a DC Elseworld project. So Elseworld's in the DC universe, so it's not part of the main storyline. This is like an alternate. This is like a separate universe. So this universe
is this the equivalent of like Agatha All Along to Marvel?
No, not at all.
Well, okay,
because Agatha All Along is in their main continuity, whereas this is a separate Batman universe where I think it's the Matt Reeves, so it's the Robert Pattinson, so it's considered more of a grounded Batman story. So like the Penguin, he's not like a comic book penguin. He has like physical deformities that makes him walk like a penguin, so he just seems penguin-like, and they call him the Penguin to make fun of him.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so think of as Robert Pattinson's The Batman that came out in 2022. Think of it as a reboot. And then from there, that's your starting point to dive into the rest of these shows. And so far, there's only two, which is The Batman, the movie, and then The Penguin, the show.
You don't need to watch The Batman to understand the Penguin series, because anything that they reference, they give you enough of a recap that all it would do is make you want to watch the movie. Like, it's you don't feel like you're missing much. Like you're just missing more context. But they give you enough in the series for you to watch it separately.
And the movie is like Colin Farrell is the Penguin in the movie, and that's basically he's getting a spin-off into his show. So like we're introduced to his character through the movie, but now we're getting a deep dive into it following the events after the movie, but not necessarily needing you to watch the movie in order to understand what's going on in the show. And very similar to Agatha All Along, the Marvel machine is already big, and that's a whole different topic in and of itself. But in theory, you don't need to watch anything else to watch Agatha All Along. They do enough to tell you, but it doesn't hurt if you watched WandaVision and then if you watch Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Those will give you context, but are not required viewings. I would say WandaVision probably more so than anything else, but they're calling these like separate seasons in a way. So like WandaVision is season 1 and Agatha All Along is season 2. There it's so much content to consume to understand certain things, but I think they're trying to be better at making, especially in the comic book genre, they are trying to make it easier to digest because there's so many strings that you have to watch. It's like, in order to see this and this, you have to watch this and this, and then some people just don't want to.
It's too much homework.
Too much homework. A lot of work.
Yes. All right, and the last thing that you said you watched that we want to talk about is Scream, as we are, because and Ernesto and I, Whatcha Watchin, we have a few horror things to talk about. So this said you did the first time you watched Scream. Why this one?
So I remember this movie came out when I was like in 5th grade, and I just remember all the excitement and like the pop culture references about it, even back when I was in 5th grade. And I've seen the Scary Movie franchise, which kind of makes fun of and is a parody of this franchise. So I was familiar with a lot of the references, and I feel like there's another Scream coming out with Jenna Ortega, if that hasn't already come out. But like, I just feel like it was in the zeitgeist again, and it was the week before Halloween. So I was like, okay, this is the perfect time to like tune in and watch this. So I watched it, and yeah, I didn't realize how much of this movie was so much a part of pop culture that like I got almost every single reference.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say it's definitely a good light, like a horror light film. It's not like overly gory. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say lighter moments, but there's a lot of digestible moments because it's more of a mystery than anything else.
That's what got me, because I didn't know who the killer was. So that's literally the only thing that kept me going, was trying to figure out who it was. Like, it was just a good old-fashioned whodunit in that regard. But I wasn't tripped out by any of the gore. I feel like I've seen worse, but I'm sure maybe at that time, like, it was the slasher movie of that time. And I feel like those movies kind of go in waves, because like there was some in the 70s and then there was some in the 80s, and this was the one for the mid-90s. But no, I mean, I can see why it has such a cult following after seeing that movie, but I don't know what more. I don't know how they got so many movies out of that one movie, because like I was like, okay, like this is
and they're making
fine,
more.
but like I don't know if we're gonna make 6 more movies out of this.
Yeah, it's a gimmick for sure. I think the two things that made this unique was, one, the amount of pop culture references, but also it's self-aware of what it's trying to be, but as well as trying to be its own thing. So it's very meta. So it's trying to be different, but also like it's trying to be different in the sense like this is a different kind of horror movie, but we're also taking all the tropes from other horror movies to make our movie unique. And they're very self-aware of that as well, because they're basically step by step going over the plot with you. And then at that point it makes it seem that it's smarter but it's also fun to watch. But at its core, it's a murder mystery. And each one of these movies are murder mysteries, and part of the fun is the whodunit aspect of it. And some of the later movies, they kind of have a little bit more fun with it, with that vibe as well. And Ernesto and I, we both actually thoroughly enjoy the Scream franchise. Yeah. I think this franchise holds up more than other classic horror movies that came before it.
Yeah, and Jenna Ortega, she's out. So they're going to 7 now, Matt? Scream 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it'd be 7.
Now Nev Campbell is returning back to the franchise for the next installment that's coming out. And you brought up Scary Movie. They're actually making another Scary Movie, and the Wayans brothers are coming back after 20 years to make the next installment.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that, and I have so many questions, because like, what's the target audience for that? Because is the target audience like millennials and Gen X, because those are the folks who grew up with the original like spoofs, or are they gonna make fun of like Megan?
Yeah, probably.
Some of the more recent movies that have come out. But like, I think it's gonna be harder to pull this off and get the same amount of laughs, because Scary Movie came out at a time when there was like more like monoculture was bigger. Like a lot of us were consuming the same music, movies, TV shows, whatever the case may be. But if you were going to take like a spoof of like horror movies now, it would have to only appeal to people who follow horror movies, because I can't think of a movie that has been a horror movie that's appealed to a wide swath of the population since, I don't know, they've all been so niche. Like, I can't think of like...
Megan is probably the biggest one. Megan's probably a big one like that of recent note. That
maybe Us, the Jordan Peele movie, but like I can't think of anything that's recently come out that they could make fun of that a lot of people would get who are not horror movie buffs.
There's also an aspect there's also the aspect that like those kind of movies, like you can't have that kind of comedy today. Like you have to, or if you do, it has to be like you have to be very careful about how you do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot that you can probably dive into there. I mean, Blumhouse in general, just the Blumhouse branding is probably a good starting point for people to make, to be spoofed on. Then I think also something to be said about, it's been a while since we have a scary movie, so they can even go into television. American Horror Story, The Haunting of Hill House, even The Walking Dead. Like those are things that have been Get Out. Like Jordan Peele and Mike Flanagan have both been horror icons throughout the years. Even now, John Krasinski with A Quiet Place. Like these are movies that have kind of consumed pop culture in a way of the modern era, and we can tackle that if they wanted to, or they can do something else. They have it's so broad of what they can do. To your point, what can they do? That's a great question, because I think there's so much that you could do. And even you have like psychological horror, like Hereditary and Midsommar. Like those are different types of horror movies that have been coming out lately. So like, I don't know. There's so many to choose from, but then how do you compile all that? and then make it funny. And to your point, I don't know if that will land as well as it did back in the early 2000s. And that's what was part of the conversation we had last week when this news dropped that the Wayans brothers are returning, and maybe they have a fresh take on it. But I don't, as my early look ahead of what this is, I don't see this being a success. And that's just me, but I'm hopeful that it could maybe be funny. I
don't know, because again, like, ask the average 22-year-old if they know who the Wayans brothers are. I don't know if they're going to know who they are. And so that's one thing that got me. But a testament to both Scream and Scary Movie, that iconic opening scene, like, I'm familiar with it. But, like, I've seen Scary Movie so many times that I was saying the Scary Movie quotes during it, realizing that it's not even.
It's not close.
It's not the same, yeah. I would say...
Carmen Electra, like, she was just so brilliant. And they're like, "Oh, what's your favorite Scary Movie?" And she says, "Shazam."
It's good for its time. I'm not sure if I would find it as hilarious on a rewatch today, but I guess we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Ernesto, let's throw it over to you. Some of the movies that you've been watching.
Well, I'm gonna start with some TV. Probably one of the best TV shows that are on TV right now, and that's Shrinking on Apple TV Plus. Jason Segel show with Harrison Ford. Season 2 just dropped. They're on their week to week, right? This is something that I am currently watching week to week, and it's just so good. Like, just how they handle mental health and just the writing of it. And this is another one, kind of what we talked about, where like there's a lot of heartfelt moments. But to me, this show is hilarious. I think all the characters are hilarious. I think the dynamics that they've built for these characters are great. Like, I'm on board for whatever the adventure of the week is that's involved in this, like, friend group / family.
Yeah, but I mean, Shrinking season 1 was incredible. It was phenomenal TV writing.
Is just as strong. It's just as good as season 1. Sheldon, have you had a chance to watch this one yet? This is one you should definitely watch.
Yes, I am on season 2 as well. Episode 1, I think that's the only one that's dropped so far.
Oh, no.
Been a few so far.
They're either on 3 or 4.
All right, so I'm still early in this season, but I think this is an all-star cast. Like, I was a fan of most of this cast in other properties and shows that they've been on. Like, who doesn't love Harrison Ford? Like, I've been a fan of Jason Segel's, like, since Forgetting Sarah Marshall and How I Met Your Mother. So he's great. And then the actress who plays Gabby, I loved her podcast. Like, that was one of my, like, entrees into listening to podcasts regularly. It was her Two Dope Queens podcast, like, in 2015. So I like to see what she brings to the role, and I'm curious to see where they're going with so many of the different storylines this season. But I'm on board.
It's funny you mentioned she played Gabby, who is played by Jessica Williams, and I was first introduced to her character in the Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore, which she played a witch in that movie, and I was like, oh wow, she's like really, really good in this movie. And then next time I saw her was Shrinking, and I was like, okay, like she's a great actress. Yeah. And so I loved watching her. And then also, even with the praise of Shrinking, I never saw Harrison Ford as a comedian, and he is hilarious in this show. And so this show brings it to light. It has some of the same team from Ted Lasso, and it brings that same infectious positivity, but also tragedy and drama and comedy. It mixes it so well together that just makes every episode fun to watch. We haven't started season 2 yet. I know Megan's about to leave for work, and then she's going to come back, and then at that moment we're probably going to start doing a couple episodes of binging it.
It's interesting the way that, like, each of the characters are tackling, like, different forms of grief and kind of working through that, whether it's like, the loss of a loved one, the death of a marriage. They're all just going through these, like, transformations in their lives and working through that while also helping each other and helping their clients. So yeah, it does give me Ted Lasso vibes, like, in the sense that, like, it's got warm fuzzies, but, like, there's also some depth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Matt, a rewatch. I rewatched The Black Phone. I introduced my wife to it for the first time. Ethan Hawke this movie is so good. Like, this movie still holds up even after we reviewed it. It's been a couple of years. It's 2 years ago we reviewed it. Where Ethan Hawke plays this like kidnapper, and he takes kids and he puts them in his closet, and it's like this weird cat and mouse that he plays with the kids. It is one of his creepiest roles, and I think
definitely
right.
creepy.
And this movie is so good. I know they're eventually going to be bringing a second one at some point, but she wanted to watch it. We actually watched this one and Megan because we went to horror nights, and she saw them in the Blumhouse Scare Zone. And she's like, "Who's that guy with the mask? And who's that lady dancing like a robot?" I was like,
"Who's that Olsen twin dancing?"
Yeah, exactly. So we actually saw both of them, and like both of them are great. You can find I think Black Phone is on Stars. I actually think both of them are on Stars or A24. Great movies. Or it's on Max.
It's crazy that they're on Stars. No, you're right. That it's on Stars. I guess they lost it because it should have been on Peacock.
Yeah,
that they're both Blumhouse, and they're both by Universal and Blumhouse. So maybe they just decided to all right, I'll take Stars. I'll take your money. You can stream.
But they were at some point, because I remember when it dropped. Megan dropped the first time. I watched the unrated version when it dropped on when it did drop originally on Peacock. So I thought it was
Peacock. Yeah.
So something else that was recommended to me by a coworker of mine, Megan Mackey. We watched Anna Kendrick's new movie, Woman of the Hour. She stars, and this is actually her directorial debut. This is a true story of this woman who went on the dating game back in the 70s and happened to be there with a real life who later to find this real life serial killer was on the game with her. And it's like this crazy story about how this guy's been killing women for all these years, and just kind of her interaction with him and how he got on the show, and it's really good. And Matt, this is one that actually you and I share. It looks like you also watched this one as well. I was really impressed with Anna Kendrick's work. I thought the film was great. Also finding out afterwards that she donated all her proceeds to domestic abuse survivors, because she said she just felt gross collecting all this income off of other people's pain, and it just details this true story about what this woman went through. At the end we get the information about how they caught this guy, and that they that he was proven to kill. I think it was like a smaller number amount, but they suspect him have killed over hundreds of women, and he was just able to walk around and get free. But this is the 70s, so I don't know. Matt, what was your take on it?
Not as favorable as yours, to be honest
really?
with you. I was not a fan of this movie at all. I maybe the sense of, I think we spent way too much time, and this is kind of a spoiler alert in some cases, we spent way too much time following the killer and not enough time with, say, building I'm not sure what this movie was trying to be, and I feel like the part of the movie that was made frustrating was that we already knew mostly what was happening without any suspense, any I had no drive to continue on what was going on, and then when we got to these moments, I didn't feel like anything much have happened in those moments. So, for example, we open up the movie with him with another. Him plotting his next kill, I guess, or whatever. And throughout the movie, we are cutting between him doing another horrendous act and then Anna Kendrick on this show. And I feel like that editing really threw me off, because we already know who this person is that's on the other side of this quote unquote 70s dating show. So the suspense of, this back and forth that they're doing, it really doesn't hold up any weight for me. We also following this other character who feels traumatized that he's even in the room and getting nowhere. She's trying to go to the police, the producers, and no one's listening to her. And I think there's a more reason for that there, just showcasing how often he got away with these horrendous acts. But there was, I feel like that the cutting away to see just another murder didn't do anything for me. As far as why are we seeing this again? I don't need to see this 4 different times, because ultimately it just showcased that he committed a murder and got away with it. You could have. I need to see it 4 times.
I see what you're saying, but I almost saw it as like we need to like kind of understand the length of these horrendous acts that he committed, all while in the context of that this guy's just sitting on the stage talking to Anna Kendrick about how he wants to date her and how he's portraying himself to be better people than these other men. I appreciated it because it gives you like, let's show us in the moment, and then like now we're kind of in his head of like things that he's done, and it's crazy to think that like in a time like that you can just drive somebody out to the middle of nowhere and kill them as long as you select your victims carefully. I mean, even spoiler alert, there was one of them, he killed this lady in her apartment. He just walked out and just walked away like nothing happened. Like, but it just to me that was a notion on more of the time in that area, because this is also they mentioned about the night people were being separate movie. I was thinking of separate. I was gonna say The Night Stalker, but that's the 80s in Los Angeles. That's the MaXXXine movie, which is another movie I also watched. But to me it was just it more of like highlighted what it was like during that time. I was able to hone in on. For me, it was able to hone in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but as at least at a storyteller perspective, I would have much rather, because the tension that was building in the game room kept getting undermined by cutting to him killing another person.
Okay.
As opposed to if we were sticking with the game show, if we started there, and then we have our 3 contestants, and not to say that we didn't need to know who was the murderer, because that wasn't a part of the show, but at that moment, like cutting away from that was the part that was really bothering me, because then it held zero weight to some degree when the lady was trying to tell people that, hey, this man is a murderer, you should get him off television screens, and then she ended getting nowhere with it. And that was just him, again, showcasing that no one was listening to anybody at that time, and they should have been and taken it more seriously, because they could have caught him out much, much sooner than that. But I guess the back and forth with it, and then ultimately we get to Anna Kendrick. She feels uncomfortable. She's trying to get out of the situation. She barely gets out of there alive, and then eventually just cuts to another situation. Like Anna Kendrick and her character was just another situation within the multiple other situations that were going down. Like her being there really had nothing to do with the rest of the story. She was just another part of the machine that he was involved in. We just gave more time to this one than the other ones. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying that like the way that it was edited was what was mainly my like this movie looked good. I thought Anna Kendrick did fine. Like nothing discredit on her directing skills. It's just the structure of it is what really bothered me. It took me out of the movie.
I could see that. I hear you on that. Like one thing for me that really stuck out is the very end when she gives him, they exchange numbers, and then they walk away, and he has a piece of paper in his hand, and he's like, "Oh, can you like repeat your number back to me?"
Yeah.
And it was funny because I was talking to Megan, the coworker who recommended the movie to me, and she was like, that is so true. Like how many times women get trapped in these awkward situations where these guys, like, you give them the fake number and they don't get a hint, or they want you to text them right there in front of them, or they want you to call them right there in front of them, or they want you to repeat back the number. And it's like, dude, just take the hint. Like why are you putting me in this awkward situation? But then think about, Anna Kendrick in that situation. She's in that situation, but with somebody who's a literal psychopath who can, and this guy is way bigger than her. So he could have easily just grabbed her and killed her. And, she could have just been easily been another victim.
Yeah. Nothing in that particular scene was stopping him from doing
I mean,
that.
he literally whispers under his breath that he's going to smash her head in, like to her.
Right.
Like she can hear him say, "Hey."
Yeah, it's Sheldon. It's a very creepy movie.
It's at least worth the. I think it's at least worth the watch. I think it's at least worth the watch.
Just hearing you guys talk about it, I kind of want to watch it. But like Anna Kendrick, I just big fan of hers, and
yes,
proud of her for kind of
she's so good
charting this new territory in her career. I feel like I vaguely remember hearing about this. I don't know if it was just promo for the movie and whatnot, but No, I think the concept of it is like great, like not great, but like you know what I mean. Like it's intriguing enough to kind of lure me in that like this guy got through and charmed all these casting directors and producers on this TV show to then get cast on this show to meet this woman. So yeah, I think I'll definitely give it a watch, even though I don't typically like gravitate towards heavy stuff outside of work because we deal with enough craziness. But like this is something that like I would make an exception for.
Yeah, I will say I'll give Anna Kendrick credit for making this her directorial debut. Like she could have easily went the easy route and just done a comedy. And Pitch Perfect 5, exactly. Easily could have done that, but instead she decided to work on a movie that that should be seen. Like it's a movie with a very sensitive topic, and it should be out there to see. I mean, I do agree with Ernesto. I think people should watch it. It just wasn't for me, and I think maybe part of it was, and maybe in the nature driven to this movie, was that it was very unsettling most of the time. And I think that was the point.
But I think your criticism is fair because there were certain points in the film where I was, because it is non-linear, because you are going back and forth. Where I was like, oh, but is this before? Is this after? There was a little bit of me being pulled out to second guess that. But for me, I guess I just enjoyed everything else so much more that I was able to overlook that.
Sure, and that's fair. And like I said, I think if the film was structured just a little bit different, like say like if we open up with Anna Kendrick and then we see her like going on this game show, we have these three random contestants, then it goes to somebody in the crowd saying, hey, I don't like that guy, that person just feels uncomfortable. And then at that moment when she's trying to find help, then we cut to the flashbacks of the other stuff that was happening, and then it cuts back to this, and then it builds on that tension a little bit more, that what they're going through. And I feel like, again, my biggest issue was the editing. I feel like this movie was edited just a little bit differently. I would have a different opinion on the movie.
That's fair.
But
all right. So another movie that Matthew and I share is MaXXXine horror. I guess this is considered like a horror thriller. This is the third movie in the Ty West horror trilogy. The first movie was X. The second movie, which is actually a prequel, is called Pearl, and then rounding out, this is the movie called MaXXXine. I thought it was good. I think in the mass of the three movies, I think Pearl for me is the strongest. Yeah, by far. It's a prequel story to the killer of the first movie, and this third movie is actually a continuation from the original movie, just continuing that storyline. It was fine. It had there were some pretty gruesome death scenes. Like there's one point where this guy follows this woman into an alleyway to try to stab her and kill her, and then this is a movie where they use the Night Stalker reference. Night Stalker, for people being scared in LA during that time. And she's walking down the alley, and this woman who just survived this like horrific killing in the first movie, she's like, this little guy pulls out a knife on her, and she pulls out a gun, and then she tells him to strip and get on his knees, and he lays on the floor, and she walks over him. Well, first she shoves his gun in his mouth and makes him do exactly what you think she would make him do when she shoves the gun in his mouth, as a way of like get back at him. And then he lays on the floor, and then she takes her 6-inch heels, and then she crushes his nuts and walks away. And like they make it a point to show you her crushing them. I was like, it was a good scene though. It was a really good scene though.
The best scene of the movie. Best scene of the movie for sure.
Because like you feel bad for him,
as graphic as,
because you feel bad for him, but at the same point you're like, yeah, you deserve that.
Yeah, as graphic as it is, it definitely drove the point home.
And then there it was good, but I felt like it just got like super campy at the end. Like there was like bodies falling out of suitcases, and I was like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, are you just going? And it seems like they kind of went for it. Like once the wheels came off, like, and it was just, everything was just off the rails at a certain point. Like at one point she pulls out a shotgun and not just like kills this person, but like literally makes their head explode when they shoot him. And she's got like a police helicopter looking at her. I was like, okay. It's like, all right, guys, what are we doing here? What's going on? And I do think that they were trying to like comment on sensationalism momentum and fame and like how people use certain fame to propel themselves, and it was fine though.
I feel like the movie was like just right there. Like it could have
been amazing.
It could have been something. It could have been really good. I think that to your point, the problem of this movie was that in a way they were trying to close out a trilogy rather than it being its own movie like the other two were. Like X, you can watch it on its own and be just fine. And then if you watch Pearl, Pearl is also on its own and it's just fine because you don't need to watch X to do that. With MaXXXine, you don't necessarily need to watch X or Pearl to understand it, but it definitely feels like that they're trying to have a connective tissue between the three movies, and I wish it didn't do that. Because honestly, the true horror, the true villain of this movie should have been Hollywood itself. Hollywood in the 80s. Ooh. And trying to strive for that perfection that is just not that, like, that she was trying to go for. She wants to be a star. She wants to be in the movies. And, like, it could have been that. Instead, we got a very campy third act. And then, honestly, it started becoming a murder mystery as well because we don't know who was doing the murders. And then we find out who it was. And then it's like, not a fan of that. And then, and then from there, it just kind of goes off the rails. And I do agree with you. I give them credit for going for it, but I just didn't think they landed. And I think like they didn't hit.
And I think you're right because in the beginning, like she pulls into like this casting studio, like this casting in front of these casting directors, and they have her read this like really heartfelt monologue, and they got her crying, and then afterwards they're like, "All right, can you take off your top, please?"
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. And then she does, and then the credits, and then the opening credits starts rolling. It's like, okay, and that's Hollywood, I guess. Like it could have been more of that, of the sense of like her just trying to make it big, and then but just like hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and then potentially even going down and committing murders herself. But it didn't go down.
But there's some pretty brutal scenes. I mean, there's literally one where Kevin Bacon is also in the movie. He plays opposite to her, and she's a fighter. So this guy is harassing her. So she literally takes like a couple of keys and like makes like almost like brass knuckles and punches him in the face with these keys, like repeatedly. He's like bleeding from his face. It's there's some scenes that are pretty good, but it's just it's good in its moments more than it is in the whole. I guess that's where I'm at with it. I guess that's where I was at with it.
I can agree there.
But yeah, Matt, that's all I got. I know you've got a few more.
Yeah, I got two more to talk about in addition to the two we already did. The one I want to talk about first is Late Night with the Devil. It's a movie that just hit on Hulu, and it was being praised by a lot of horror fans out there, and they're really going for it. This movie, it takes place as if it was a documentary. Like the whole movie kind of goes into the sense of like what you're about to see was documented from a late night television show in 1977, and this is like the found footage that it was on it. And you see, and they said that this was compiled for what was aired on television as well as behind the scene footage that they were kind of collecting. So that was like the opening of the movie. And then from there, you get to see different angles. So you see what was on television, and then you say, okay, we're gonna go to a commercial break, and then it cuts to like somebody like following them with the camera and everything. And it created like unique dynamic to see that, and then throw horror into it. Because then strange supernatural things started happening on their Halloween episode. And that's why this is like, people talk about this, but like, you can't find this footage anywhere because of how like, not graphic, but how like what craziness happened. And then it gets to the end of the movie and you see the craziness that happened, and it's pretty spectacular. Like I enjoyed it for the ride. And then it kind of just goes off the rails toward the end. It's like, no, I like how we got there. Like, the journey was good enough to the ending to make it be all over the place. So I recommend it if anyone's interested. It's on Hulu.
We were gonna watch it, but my wife was like, "It looks like a possession movie," and she's like, "Nah, I don't do possession movies." So we didn't. We ended up not watching that one. I am still interested in it though.
You will be right. There is possession in it. So there's that, and there's also another story angle about it, and also it has this graininess to it. Like it does look like it was like filmed with in the 70s. So they did a really good job, and it's also, this movie's extremely indie. So like for them to kind of give us this level on an indie project, it definitely shows like the passion they wanted.
And I like the main lead. What's his name? Daniel Masterson.
Dave Dismulsion. Yeah. But yeah, and the last movie I want to talk about is a movie that I'm actually not going to talk about. is The Substance.
What?
All I'm going to say is that you should watch it, and it's a 5 out of 5 for me.
Oh, whoa!
That's it.
I've heard nothing but good things about this too. Like, yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but like, Demi Moore was like great in it, and it brings up just like all of these like topical things with like aging and working in this industry.
Mm-hmm. What did you?
Ernesto, are you familiar with it?
I'm not actually. What is it on? Is it on anything, or is it on theaters?
It wasn't theater. I think it still is in theaters. That's where I saw it. I saw it in theaters. But it just hit the streaming service called Mumbai. So if you can sign up for a free trial on it, and sometimes some Oscar stuff actually gets through the Mumbai streaming service. Like a couple of shorts that throughout the years I've seen them on there. But yeah, this is Mumbai's film, and it is a 5 out of 5 movie for me. The reason why I want to talk about it is because the less you know about it, the better the movie is. And I think honestly, I was debating and even showing this poster. Like, I'm not saying that gives anything away, but like you can allude, use your imagination.
I have an idea, but
well, fine. That's where we're going with it, Ernesto. I won't tell you, but like, just my only knowledge of this is just interviews that I've heard on the radio and podcasts about it, and it was enough that I was like, oh, I'm intrigued to like go watch this movie after hearing like interviews and like,
Do you think it'll be? Do you think it'll be in the Oscar conversation for next year?
I know people have been talking about it, but as far as like Variety and the Hollywood Reporter and other news and other sites that are doing Oscar predictions right now, they're putting it at like your 11 to 15 number.
Okay.
Like if they're only going to nominate 10, it's not in their top 10, but it's really close up there. So if it has enough of a push, maybe it could be pushed into the top 10 as far as best picture quality. Okay. Or at least we can get into like acting or other like designs of like production design or costume design or stuff like that. Like I can see them getting through there, but as of right now, it's like just shy of being in the conversation. But I know more and more people are talking about it, which could lend to it getting more eyes on it, and then maybe potentially getting for best picture quality. I certainly believe it is. I think it should definitely be in the conversation for sure. But I really don't want to talk about the movie until Ernesto has seen it, and then we can maybe dive into a larger discussion on it. But I just was so blown away of like from literally the opening moment to the end. I was like, wow, there was a lot that happened in this movie, but that to me, that's cinema. Like that is cinema. I was very, very shocked on how much I enjoyed this movie and all the high praise. It's true. It's 5 out of 5 for me. So that's all I'm going to say about it.
Well, damn, man. I guess I'm going to have to go and watch this movie then.
Yeah. I don't want to be vague about it, but I truly believe that the less you know about this movie, the more of those particular scenes that happen hits even harder because no one like alluded to a certain thing that might happen. And I think with certain movies, I think it warrants that kind of going in blind into a movie, because then if you weren't given any context, you're not preparing for anything. And then, I think you would get a better experience out of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
you sold me.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all we've been watching. It was a lengthy one, so you're welcome, David. And so with that, we're going to be diving into our spoiler review of Forrest Gump. As Ernesto said earlier, it is from the writer's director.
You said Forrest Gump.
I'm sorry. Yes. Let's rewind again. So now we're going to be diving into our spoiler review of Here, brought to you by the writers, directors, and stars of Forrest Gump. But on top of that, actually, there's more than just that. There were 8. Let me get my notes here. It was where is that? Right here. The film reunites 8 cast members and crew members from the original Forrest Gump movie. So in addition to Robin Wright and Tom Hanks, you also had director Robert Zemeckis with writer Eric Roth. You have cinematographer Don Burgess and composer Alan Silvestri, sound designer Randy Randy Tom, and costume designer Joanna Johnson. So I think it's kind of incredible that a lot of these people who worked on the original, I say original, who worked on Forrest Gump, decided to all come back together to work on this project, and yet, in a way, it doesn't have the same quality. So, Sheldon, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on here?
So I've got to say, like, I was hooked from the trailer. Whenever the trailer came out, like, they had me with Tom Hanks hobbling around in that empty, like, living room with the folding chairs. I was like, I got to see this. And I liked the conceit of this movie, like what they were trying to do. And I appreciate the artistic, like, vision that was executed. I'm a sucker for any type of, like, intergenerational, like, family dynamics. I love a coming of age story, and this movie had all of that. I love the perspective of, like, you being in this, like, position in this family's living room over the course of all of these different families that have shared that particular space. So yes, those are all the things I liked, but, like, I don't know, I feel like Robin Wright was, like, the best acting part of it. Like, everybody else's acting was kind of like whatever. And the AI and the CGI, like, were taking me out. Like, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose to kind of show, like, hey, this is where Hollywood's going next. But, like, it was too distracting for me because I was like, some of the stuff that they were using for AI and, like, CGI type stuff, they could have easily, like, built a set or, like, done prosthetics or makeup on people. And those moments kept taking me out because there's that opening scene in the movie where, you know, you're kind of watching this, like, window in this family's living room, and it goes all the way to prehistoric times, and you got dinosaurs going around. And then when the green hummingbird was around, I was like, okay, what are we doing? Like, that was my first, like, when I saw the hummingbird in the, like, opening sequence, I was just like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? So I had to kind of remove myself a little bit from that. I do appreciate the artistic value of this movie, but I was not a fan of the technology that was used throughout.
You definitely have to go into this movie with two minds after watching it, because to your point, there is a technical aspect to this movie, and then there's a storytelling aspect of this movie. And sometimes, to your point, it really doesn't meld together. Ernesto, what were your thoughts on here?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I didn't mind the AI, because I think maybe I was looking at it more as a technical aspect, to just because there's parts of it that's like very unless you're looking really hard, like, you can see where the lines are, you can kind of see where the makeup is, and because we know like what they look like in real life in comparison to what they're trying to portray them as. So I spent a lot of my time like, oh shit, like, wow, they, like, look how they did that. Like, they changed the shape of his face. Like, they also I also felt like they during certain years they changed, like, his voice a little bit. I felt like they made his voice a little bit younger, because there's this moment where he's sitting, where Paul Bettany as the father he's walking around the living room, and you're with like a tween Tom Hanks character, Richard, and has his back towards him, and I felt like it doesn't look like him, but it sounds like him. It sounds like a very young version. It had, like, hints of his voice, and to me, I was like, that pulled me out of the story, because I was like, is that him? Is that him right there? It's like, no, that's not him, but that sounds like Tom Hanks from Big. Like, it just sounds like but I thought it was cool. To me, it makes sense for them to put it in a stationary camera, is for them to do this specific de-aging, because then that's less work for the camera to do. If it's stationary, it doesn't have to change the background. It just has to focus on these two individuals that they're trying to follow with this makeup, and not have to also change the background. So that I understood the technical aspect that did it. The movie plays out like a play almost. I thought it was interesting to see, like, how they changed the set over time. I did think it was weird that we went back to prehistoric times, like, of all things. Like, what did we need to see the dinosaurs? Like, I understand, like, I understand of us trying to give us every We need to see all the moments that this spot has created. The building of, Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son's house, and then them chopping that tree down in front, which we get to revisit. I did think it was cool how we did link back to the Indians that were the Indian family that was passing through, Native Americans, excuse me, when the woman was dead and they planted her necklace, and then later on we see Paul Bettany's wife. She lets in those researchers and they find like the same thing. There were just a lot of interest. There were a lot of things that were interesting. I felt like they could have done more with what they had.
I feel like if we're going prehistoric, we might as well go future.
That's a good point. Well, we kind of did. We kind of did a little bit. We did a little bit. I guess it was in the past.
I don't think so. I think we just went to present day. Like, we went to literally here now.
Yeah. COVID.
Like, when this movie came out, November 1st, 2024. That's where we ended up getting to at this point of the movie. But I kind of sharing the same sentiment. This movie definitely felt like a play. It's almost like if I were to sit down in a theater to watch this play out, the sets would probably be like on a swivel, and then I can just see them like people just turning the set into something else, and then this is the same moment in there. It definitely felt like a play, which kind of brought the pacing down a little bit. And then secondary to that is that the editing of this movie, the consistent going back and forth between what I would say probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 different, consistently about 6 different storylines within happening in this one space, with the exception of like the age of the dinosaurs, and then you have when the house was for sale that kicked off the beginning and the end of the movie, and then you have the modern family, the black family that was living there after it seemed like the events of the Tom Hanks stuff. But like the consistent going back and forth really pulled me out of the movie, because you're invested into one story and then quickly they're like, well, what's Tom Hanks doing? It's like, all right, that's fine. Now back to Native Americans. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. Let's get that in there. And then we had like these little blocks that they also referenced as well. Like they're to also showcase through time, they were giving, and also a sort of, they're like, well, technically we didn't move the camera. We just put boxes in front of it. And that was their transition moments of like, this is happening around this time when this major moment's happening. There was a lot of sense of history repeats itself. There's a lot of sense of life is a circle. There was like time flies. Like there was a lot of those elements in there that I just felt like we did not hit that emotion that you wanted me to feel. And I think that's the big thing to come from that. Or Sheldon?
Okay, so I did feel the emotion. Like it was a little jumpy, going all over the place with all these different storylines, and you kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about some of these other families that occupied that space. But that said, like I still got like emotional at the movie theater for like some of the different storylines throughout there, because I think every couple kind of approached that house with like their hopes, their aspirations, like, and they each left that space for different reasons, whether it was an exciting job promotion for that one couple before the war with the lazy boy, relaxy boy chair. And then that made way for, Tom Hanks' family, his parents to move in after they came home from the war on the GI Bill, or the family with the pilot for the dad, and the mom wanted to sell the house after he died, and the daughter's like, oh, I'm going to miss this place. And the mom's like, I'm not. And that's kind of like the segue out of that family's experience. But like each family had like either a high or a low that they left that house on, including the present day family during COVID. But for me, like I am a stickler for time and references. And and this could just be me because like I know this about myself, but I spent too much time trying to figure out like where we were and like how that fit into like what else was going on. So they made some like kind of broad references. So like, yeah, you knew it was like somewhere in the 2020, 2021 section for the most recent family with the COVID storyline. And then I'm assuming the family with the airplane was like the 1920s because they talked about the influenza, deadly influenza outbreak. But I don't know, there was a few things where I'm just like, wait, so how old are Tom Hanks and Robin Wright's characters? Because I feel like time for them did not move at like an accurate pace for me, just based on like the reference points. Because if they got married, sorry, I'm going in. But
no, you're fine.
If they got married at 18, had Vanessa, like, you know, when they were either 18 or 19, and when Vanessa, like, is a teenager, I was like, well, technically she would have been a teenager in the 70s, not the 80s. And, like, that took me out of, like, that moment. But they wanted so bad to progress the story along. And I'm just like, well, they wouldn't have been that old at that point. Like, so even when they were celebrating, like, their, like, older age and so forth, I was like, no, I don't think they're going to be that old yet. Like, they're probably, like, sorry. So that's super technical. But I think that, like, because the movie was switching around so much, like, they gave you like little snippets of things that would happen, and I would wonder, like, well, I want to find out what was the rest of that. Like when Robin Wright's character came home from Christmas shopping, and the daughter like was passed out in front of the tree. Did she have a medical emergency? Did she get into drugs when she was a teenager? Like, what happened in that moment? And they just like, it was gut wrenching hearing her scream and like not knowing like what prompted that and what was the result of it.
I don't believe that was the daughter. I believe that was her mother-in-law who fell off the tree.
Oh,
when she had the stroke.
When she had the stroke.
Yes. When she had the stroke. Yeah.
I thought she was calling out to Vanessa, and then she just started screaming. So I thought it was Vanessa, not realizing it was the grandmother.
Yeah. So that kind of led to the stroke, and then we.
Yes. Okay. But like I love just like stories about just like the cycle of life and just the banality of it all, just kind of like these mundane things that so many families have gone through in that space, and that's kind of what connects them throughout. I fully embrace that technology is here, and like I'm glad that we can use it in some capacity. But like, did we need to use it for like the sets or even like the Native American storyline? Like they like those people, like you could have put some prosthetics on them. Like, they didn't need the CGI and like AI. I get it for Tom Hanks and Robin Wright because like they were the storyline that was like kind of the longest through line thread. But for everybody else, I was like, okay, the decoration in the living room doesn't need to be kind of computerized. And same with like that family. Like they could have built like an outdoor set for that, or even just shot it outside and had it still framed in the exact same way. I don't know. I was so distracted, especially when the mourners were carrying that Native American woman. And I was like, is this even a real person? Like, it looks like a video game.
Honestly, when they were focusing on, like, when they were very up and close and personal with your dog's trying to make a really big effort to be on the show, and I appreciate it.
I've been trying to calm her down for, like, the last 30 minutes. So yes, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You're good. You're good. When we got, like, even though there's a scene when Robin Wright decides to like go in front of the camera and like she's like right there, and the same scene where like the Native American woman dies and like they stop and like right in front of the camera. Those were like I feel like the movies are like showing it's cracked. It's like no, let's push back. Let's push it back.
So close.
We don't need to see it that close. It's like it looks off-putting, and I think to some degree also. Side note, Tom Hanks was never 18. He said, "Dad, I'm in high school." No, you're not. You're not. Not even a little bit.
Not
even her. It's like, look, to me, that was one of the most distracting parts of it. It's like, Dad, no, she's pregnant. It's like, no, Tom Hanks, you are 50 right now. No de-aging is going to make you look 18. These scenes, and I think it would have played better if they were just younger actors. Yes. Like, there's no way that you could still have the same story and not have the technical aspect of it. And I feel like that's a interesting thing between what the movie wanted to push the boundaries on and, in my opinion, sacrifice the story. Like, we want to rely heavily on the performances of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, but I think it suffered the overall movie because it just became too distracting on those, especially those younger scenes. And Ernesto, to your point, I'm pretty sure if they just put Tom Hanks' face on a child, and they used his voice in that scene. And because I'm looking at it, I'm like,
right? He's sitting in the corner, like,
Tom
I'm
Hanks'
like, I
face?
clean my glasses. Is that Tom Hanks in that corner? No, I ain't him.
Yeah, it's like, is that a young boy, or is that Tom Hanks's face? And I can't tell.
Both.
And that we should not be having these moments in the movie.
It takes you out of it. But it gets to the point where the technology is distracting, like, and it takes away from like the storyline. I like the concept of like focusing on this one spot and seeing kind of like what's happened, in that space over the course of its history and so forth. But and I was talking to my like parents after I saw the movie yesterday, and I was just like, I liked what they were trying to go for, but the technology just really took me out of it. And I think another way that this could have been interesting is if they had Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, like maybe as like the husband-wife duo for the different time periods. So putting them in the clothes from the 1700s, putting them in the clothes from the, like, just that way, like, but maybe that would have been like too much too. But I don't know. Like, Robin Wright really carried this movie. Like, and she was the only performer whose performance I was impressed with. Like, I feel like she did a really good job for all of the different eras that she was acting in. And then Paul Bettany, I guess the guy who played the dad, those were the only two acting performances that stood out to me. Everything else was like, meh.
Yeah.
And it's sad because I felt like there was a lot of good elements that they could have explored. Like, I love, like, Tom Hanks reflecting on his life and the whole storyline with him having to give up his art to become an insurance agent, and like that coming back to him, his wife coming back to him, be like, "Oh, you didn't have to quit." And it's like, well, hold on, let's explore that. Like, that's
gonna feed our kid.
Like, exactly, like that's super interesting. That's a super interesting thing that we need to explore, because how many others can relate to that, where you have to sacrifice what you're doing, the thing that you love, so that you can care for your family, and like which holds more weight. Like, yeah, you need to feed your family, but like, are you killing your soul and yourself in the process for that, or what is the happy medium of that?
Yeah, and it's such a difficult line. Like, those storytelling aspects was what really for me was carrying the movie. The sad part is that we kept cutting away to something else that had zero relevance to it. Because I feel like there were three different things that were happening in the movie, in my opinion. One, you had the technical aspect of it, where the shot's not moving and we're getting distracted by the AI and the de-aging of it all. Then the second aspect is like, okay, now we have this like here moment where we're seeing different storylines that are happening throughout this one singular fixed point. And then we have the story of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And like, obviously we're spending a lot of time with that and we want to be invested in those characters. But as soon as something happens, there's like, okay, we're seeing a brief moment into their lives, and let's go over there and watch an inventor build a lazy boy. What does that have to do with anything, with the exception of the overarching story, which is look at all these different things that are happening in this moment, and like how are different people doing their lives. And then you also have the sense of people moving out of the homes, and that there's parallels there. Even wanting a divorce, even the juxtaposition of someone's having the biggest success of their life, and they're having all their life moments are coming to them, and their life is great for them, and then it quickly cuts to, I want to get a divorce, someone's dying, I want to leave this house. And so like these different moments of time within the same fixed point seems interesting. I just wonder if we would have picked this in a linear fashion, if maybe it would have driven the point a little bit more. So probably in the culmination of time, we could have spent maybe 5 minutes in prehistoric times. We could have spent another 5 minutes on the Native Americans, another 10 minutes on the colonialism of it all, and then going back and forth. So if we were being told linearly, like, then maybe it could have driven home the fact a little bit more, rather than quickly coming in and out of these little pockets of like windows in time, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ernesto.
Well, I was just going to say that, like, I didn't even mind the non-linear aspect. I just felt like they should have given us longer vignettes, or just tied them together. Because it seems like the way they tried to tie them together is by, like, life event. So, like, whenever a family would go through a life event, all right, well, no, let's experience that kind of life event throughout these different families. So, like, everybody had, there was, like, the loss of a kid, there was the loss of a parent, Only one I didn't really see that with is with the inventors, because like this relaxy boy, lazy boy, that was their child. They were like, they didn't have any children. So this invention was his creation, his child.
And they kind of found success into that, and then they probably within the success were able to move into what we assume is maybe a bigger house, a better living situation for themselves. Like this was like out of all the stories, they received no tragedy whatsoever within the moments of this. Within the time that they were staying in this house, they experienced nothing. It seemed to be bad happening to them. Whereas in the other moments, like we see kind of like in the sense that their version of the story was the ups of life. And then through other aspects, we see the downs of life, or like, it just kind of stay in the status quo where nothing much is happening. And to Sheldon, your point, I think Robin Wright had some of the most compelling moments in the movie, because she is the one that is like, we are here, and she does not want to be here. And we see that consistently throughout the movie. Like we are trying to leave. We need to build our home elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But yet there's excuses after excuses after excuses from Tom Hanks's character. And we see these elements of how they are trapped and what they feel like the reason why they are here. So you have someone who's very comfortable, and then you have someone who wants to branch out and have a life of her own, but yet there are so many roadblocks of life, so to speak, that are stopping them from truly living their lives and, just being stuck. Ernesto, you made the point of him wanting to be an artist, but yet he wanted to provide to his family. But yet whatever he was making could not afford to live outside of this home. So then you ask yourself, well, what was it really? Are you just so comfortable in this house that you didn't want to leave and not try to make it work? Or did you truly couldn't find a way to make it work?
I think that Tom Hanks is probably representative of like the average person, because I think more couples go through what his character and Robin Wright's character go through, like where you're kind of growing at different paces, especially couples that like meet in like their teens and 20s, because you're still growing as a couple and you're growing individually. So I think that storyline is especially relatable to everyone. I think Robin Wright kind of taking that departure, that's noble and that's aspirational, but most people are Tom Hanks in this scenario across the board. They are folks who like lost sight of what they were inspired to do, and doesn't mean that their life wasn't fulfilled. Like they still had loving relationships and they still provided for their kids and their parents and so forth. But they accepted like that life that they kind of found themselves in, and they're okay with that complacency. That's most people. And then I kind of wish that they kind of went into Tom Hanks's like storyline a little bit more, because that one is that's the one that's a little bit more relatable.
Yeah, I mean, even Robin Wright's character, whereas her, you could tell there was like a tinge of jealousy with her, almost like living vicariously through her daughter, because we learned early on that she wanted to be a lawyer, but she was kind of you hear Paul Bettany's character, he's like, you're gonna work or something. Something.
He's like, you need to be a wife.
Be a wife. You're gonna get a job, like something dumb. He's saying some stupid shit. Either way, like he's like. But then later on with her daughter, when she's having her 50th birthday party, she's like almost in tears because she's almost like regretful of her life. And she's like, my daughter, she's the youngest in her law firm, and every time they would refer to her, as in like somebody distant who you don't really talk to anymore. I just thought it was interesting.
Vanessa got away from there.
Yeah, Vanessa got out. She saw that life and saw that she didn't want that, and her parents had the means for her to go to and they see, that it was worth the gamble for them.
I just thought of something interesting. For all the people who left that space, the grandfather, Paul Bettany, was the only one he's the only one that we saw return. So Vanessa leaves to go off to college and starts her life. We don't see her back in that space again. Ricky's brother and sister leave to go kind of do their life. We never see them back in that space again. And it's only when the dad got sick, he's the only character that returns to that space after leaving it.
That's a really good point. And
the mom came back, but she was like, at that point, she was already like, she was already sick in the terms of passing.
Well,
because they went down to Florida. No, she was sick,
you're right.
and they went down to Florida, and the dad came back after she died.
That's right.
And it ended up just being him being the one coming back. I does this mean like the stuff that I'm pointing out, like I was still again weeping in the movie theater, and I heard other sniffles as well. So it's like I'm not the only one. I just see this kind of collection of like just kind of like the mundane things of life that everybody kind of goes through these different life cycles, and when you see it kind of like in a collection like that from one vantage point, like it just kind of like shrinks our connections just as humans.
I think it's. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say that I think it's interesting that, like, there are certain things to pick apart about this film, but whereas the basis of this premise, like, and like the actual story, is interesting. Like, we're here talking about certain elements and like the importance of them, but at the same token, talking at certain points that we were pulled out of the movie. So, like, there are certain parts that were so strong that were able to captivate us, regardless of the things that we were nitpicky about. Like, so it feels like the movie was a missed opportunity.
Absolutely, and the going back to kind of what you were just saying, like, kind of praising the movie, but also inadvertently bringing it down. Like, the moment that I feel like I was getting probably the most emotional about was actually toward the end, where Tom Hanks is coming in, and at this point we don't really know exactly what the relationship between him and Robin Wright is. We assume that they could have gotten back together, but we truly don't know. And I'm going to assume that they did not get back together, because even at the final scene of Thanksgiving, that when it was just the two of them, there was like, oh, my fortune is like, you get back with a lost love, and then she's like, not going to happen. But throughout time, she, looks like she gets dementia, and at this point, it could be like Tom Hanks is now a caregiver to Robin Wright's character, rather than being a married couple. And so then, in efforts of probably seeing that there was an open house of the old house they used to live in after the modern day family left, we see them kind of sitting down, and almost in an effort for Tom Hanks to be like, hey, let's kind of see if anything jogs your memory in a way. And we see him trying to describe this is where we live, this is where we stayed, this is where this happened. And all of a sudden, there's this moment that clicks in her. Like, oh, yes, the blue ribbon that Vanessa lost. And she's like, beat for beat, recalling it as we saw it earlier in the film. Of like, and even toward the end of that scene earlier in the film, they were like, oh, this is going to be a good moment when our daughter found the blue ribbon. And kind of like in a very emotional way, that was the thing that she remembered. And one of the closing lines of the movie was, she loved this place. When we know that she hated this place almost from the beginning, but yet at the end of her life, the part that she remembered, that's the part that she decides to be like, oh yes, I remember that, and I love this place for it. When we know that's not truly the case, but at the end of the day, when you get down to your life, and I also kind of appreciate as I'm speaking this out loud, that we are getting these little vignettes throughout history. There's a lot of bad stuff that happens, to everybody, misfortunes, struggles, but at the end of the day, you remember the good stuff, most likely. You remember these key moments. You don't remember really how you got there, but you just remember that, remember the time when we went to Disney and it was great, rather than remember the time we sat in traffic for 2 hours and we waited in line for the 3 hours, then we had like this crappy food elsewhere, and then the beds weren't as comfortable and all that stuff. You don't remember all that. You just remember that you went to Disney, and that was a moment. You don't remember all the struggles to get there. And I feel like in this movie kind of highlighted some of that as well, where you're getting these are a lot of struggling moments, a lot of tough moments that happened within this space. But the one thing that she remembered that mattered was that her daughter found a blue ribbon, and it was, and that was her core memory, and that's what she loves this place, and that she would rather be here. And I think that's so telling. And like, to me, that was the part that got me emotional, of how, like, you just really don't know, like that is life. We just remember the good stuff and not really the struggles that we hated this place in the first place. Or in a way, in her case, is a little bit different, but like, you take for granted what you had. I don't think that was necessarily the case here, but in some cases, like, you didn't know how good you had it until you left, and then you wanted to come back. But in the case of Tom Hanks, you know, it's a cautionary tale for him as well. Like, the life that he could have lived, a lot of, like, looking back at, you know, of like, yeah, you could have left this space, but yet here you are, and that's what makes you comfortable. Sheldon, you were talking about, like, how that's the average man for all of us.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because so many people of that generation, like especially older boomers, that was the mentality. Like, I think Robin Wright's character had regrets, but I wouldn't say that Ricky, Tom Hanks' character, I don't think that he had regrets. Like, he made a choice and he leaned into it, no matter what. So, like, I feel like you can only have regret for something that you consciously, like, kind of passed on to do something else. And he did something because he wanted to do it, not because, like, she felt like this calling, this restlessness her entire life. And he's like, no, this is the life that I'm in, and this is the life that I'm going to lead. So that's the difference between the two of them. So, like, and I don't think that he was a martyr about it. I just think that, like, he's like, okay, I did what I had to do for my family. And again, across gender roles, there are lots of women, if we talk to, like, any of the older women in our families, as far as, like, the older aunts or grandparents and so forth, you just did what you had to do for your family. There was no time to, like, really think about your dreams and, like, do what you wanted to do and so forth. So I do think it's rare that she was able to do that and, like, made that switch in her 60s. Because most people spend their whole life like Tom Hanks, where they never even go back and revisit.
True.
Right. And also, to your point, like, to have that realization that, you know, this isn't the life that I want at an older age. And we kind of feel happy for her in those moments, because we see her talking with, well, we see Tom Hanks talking with Vanessa and was like, hey, oh, you're having fun with your mom. Oh, that's great. Oh, you guys finally went to France. Like, they still built that connection together, even though she left them. But, you know, the daughter was the one that was kind of the glue for them. But then then the dementia starts kicking in, and then you start falling back on the people who care about you. And that's, in a way, that it's just truly sad to see how a lot of these situations kind of turned out. We have the father who wanted to provide for his family this entire time, and the mother who also had aspirations as well. And, like, you feel like there's a sense that you're stuck here, but also this is the moments that made you. And there's a beautiful nature to all this. And again, all this to say, Ernesto, to your point, that we are necessarily nitpicking on some of the moments here, but on the moments that did hit, I thought it hit very strong.
Agreed.
Like, the story element there, it's strong. It just gets negated on certain other aspects of it that I felt like, again, we're talking about a technical aspect of it. We're talking about the overarching story, and we were talking about the story of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And I think the story of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright was the most compelling thing about it. I think, unfortunately, it was distracted by the other elements in the movie that kind of pulled us away, that doesn't make the movie overall as strong. The AI was necessarily not needed to make this movie a success.
Yeah.
I
agree.
We could have eliminated it.
They
could have done it without it, and it would have been so compelling. If we had just gotten a straight drama about their life from start to finish, I think this would have been, like, on the it could have been on the level of, like, Forrest Gump. That's how good I think this movie could have been. There's so many good elements. There's just so many good elements for them to explore, that even the brief moments that we touched on them, I was fully locked in when we were going through these moments.
Honestly, you could have started with Paul Bettany looking at the house.
100%.
And like, you didn't necessarily need the other moments, but the other moments was there to serve the overarching story of, look how many things that were happening in this one singular space. But that took you out of it. Again, going back to the CGI of it. Unfortunately for Robert Zemeckis, he's always big into pushing the boundaries of CGI. Yeah. We see it in all of his movies that he's been coming out with in the last couple of years, even with the Polar Express. I love the Polar Express, but people cannot get through the Polar Express because of how off-putting it looks. I can look past it. I go ahead.
Didn't watch the movie because of the way it looked.
Right, and that's a barrier for a lot of people. I can get past it, and I really enjoy the story behind it. But I understand why people don't go for it. For me, I feel the same way for a movie he did called Beowulf. That movie toys the line with Uncanny Valley, and it's horrifying to look at in a way. when you think about it. Like if you want a true horror movie, go look at Beowulf. But also, this is the same person that has captivated audiences in the late 80s and 90s with Back to the Future and Castaway and Forrest Gump and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, he is a storyteller, and he was able to push the boundaries of CGI within those movies to elevate his films. But then I think we're really focusing on the CGI way too much in his career that is now pulling his movies down. And that's the part that, like, it's so frustrating to see, because there's so much potential, particularly with this movie, that it just gets just bogged down by the de-aging of it all. Like, all of this could have been solved. Like, the idea of a fixed camera is great. Mm-hmm. I love the idea. Just hire younger actors to play these roles. You could have solved a lot of your problems. Eventually, we get it. We will get to Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, but just go through the motions to get there first. We didn't need them to play an 18-year-old version, because they're not. No de-aging is going to make a 6-foot tall man 18 and look like hey Dad, here's my new girlfriend. No, that's not how
everything
that
has its limitations.
Yeah.
Both of their wigs, it wasn't working. Like, it just wasn't. They should have gotten somebody younger. I totally agree. But Matt, I was telling Ernesto at work today that, even though there were things about this movie that I didn't like, there were also things about this movie I did like, and I feel like we've kind of moved into a part of culture where if something has a little bit of something that we don't like, we're like, oh, that was a terrible movie, or right. People are like, we're just at peak extreme culture right now. I feel like on both sides, but it's okay, we can look at something and it can be something can be mid, and there's some good elements, there's some kind of stuff that we didn't like about it. It doesn't make it a flop. It doesn't make it a blockbuster. It's just kind of it was mid.
It was mid, yeah.
And I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say to your point, if a movie can make you feel anything, I think it did its job.
Yeah.
Right. And, some people don't want to feel mad about it, but if you're coming out of there with an emotion, then obviously this movie did something for you, and you can have a strong emotion about the movie, being you are pissed off, and that's the reaction that you had from it. But that's not the case in this movie. And in this movie, there were moments that made me feel something, that made me think about some things, made me think about my own life. It did that. It just, unfortunately, as a whole, there were other elements that just didn't work for it, and then it pulled you out of the movie. Yeah. And you kind of, now at that point, that becomes nitpicking. You want to see what elements worked and didn't work, and yet there was an avenue here where this could have been in the conversation for the Oscars.
Yeah,
easily,
100%. Yeah.
But yeah, we got
bogged down. It was going to look more like Forrest Gump, and I think back to Ernesto's point, if they had relied a little less on the technology, because I kind of like the way that they use those scene boxes to move everything around, because it did feel like a play. But I didn't need to see cartoon workmen building the basement for the house. We could hire some background actors to go and do that part. Why did we have to have so those elements took me out of it, because it felt like part picture book, part real life. I just yeah.
And don't get me wrong, when your career is filled with blockbusters after blockbusters, you can afford to make any creative project you want after that, and there's going to be a studio that's going to back you up. And probably at this point in his career, that's probably exactly what he's doing. Yeah. He could honestly care less about what anyone thinks about this movie. For him, this was it'd be a cool idea if we got the band back together for 40. Yeah. And we had this one cool idea where we just don't move the camera, and then everything else around is just moving, and we're gonna have these little boxes. That'd be cool, right? And then oh, Miramax, you're gonna make it for us, and Sony, okay, cool, all right, yeah, let's do it. That's what it felt like to me.
So that's what got people's butts in the chairs this weekend, was the director and the two lead actors. Because I told Ernesto I saw a matinee in Sunday afternoon, and most of the seats were filled. I thought it was going to be me and a handful of other people, but most of the seats were filled, and I wasn't expecting it to be that big for opening weekend. But again, these are two well-known names, a well-known director. We all were hoping for something different.
Yeah, Friday morning, my theater was packed.
Hold on, Sheldon. You said you went to Winter Park?
Yeah.
What time did you go see the movie on Sunday?
The 1:20 showing.
We were in the same theater.
No way.
We were in the same theater.
I was in row G.
I was in the like the floor. There's not a row for it. It's like it's like the handicap section where you have like the seat and the spot, because I went all the way to the top floor or the top, and then someone was in my seat. So I was like, I'm not going to fight this old lady. So I went back down and just sat in another random chair.
Get out my seat.
Matt, I can't believe you were in the same movie theater.
I was like, wait a minute. You said Sunday? You saw it Sunday, right? You saw it yesterday?
Sunday at 1:20, which really was 1:45 when the movie actually started. But yeah.
Yeah, I strolled in around 1:30. Yeah, we were in the same theater.
I watched it at 1:30. Like,
probably missed you by a minute.
That's hilarious. At this point. How funny is that?
That's so, we could have talked about, we could have saw this movie together. We could have sat down, had some nice popcorn. We should have coordinated. We should have known.
I didn't even think of that. Like, I didn't even think, but like, that's too funny. But yeah, no, I was in that theater at 1:20 yesterday, and
it was packed.
But there was like a couple people sitting next to me, and like they were asking each other questions throughout the movie, and I was like, okay, I'm not the only person who's kind of like confused about some of this stuff, because
that's a good observation.
There were times where like some of the like storylines were making references to people, and then the guy next to me goes, "Who's that again?" Well, like. And I said, you touche. Like, they introduced so many people that like you almost needed like a family tree to like just connect all the different characters. Or if this were a book or a play, like I'd be flipping back to the front to see like what all the different like connections and webs are.
And to your point, I would have honestly preferred if it was a family tree. If this house was passed on from generation to generation, I think it would have more connective tissue to it. But I still respect the idea of like different families are coming in and out of this space. Because sure, there's one you can think of as like when we are looking for a new place to stay, we do kind of wonder sometimes who was here before. And sometimes, just like the end of the movie, you go back to what made, some positive memories. Like, oh, I remember that house. We should go look at it. We're not going to go inside because people are living it, but let's drive by it, see how it looks. It looks exactly the same. It's not going to change. But like, you know what I mean? It's like you have those moments. And so I can understand the appeal of it. But I think as far as with a lot that was going on in this movie, to kind of centralize it a little bit, it could have been a generational story of like passed down, like this house was there from whatever until eventually maybe no longer. But talking about like our theaters were necessarily packed in the theater. Our theaters were packed, but obviously it did not respond well to the overall box office. Very quickly, this movie opened to $5 million. It didn't look like it had much of an international release, and it had a budget of around $45 million. So in order for it to make a profit, we're probably looking at about $100 million range, and that's clearly not going to happen. This movie opened at number 5, so it wasn't even cracking the top 3. And so it's kind of sad that, in some cases, I was reading an article talking about like, does Tom Hanks lose his star power? And I think it depends on the movie. The last movie he starred in that I remember was called A Man Called Otto, and that was and that made over $100 million. So like definitely he had the star power, and I think having Tom Hanks and Robin Wright brings a certain crowd in there for sure. But clearly, this particular story did not appeal to the masses to probably the extent that they wanted to. And they were definitely pushing forward that these are the people who brought you Forrest Gump. You love Forrest Gump, so you should come back and watch this movie. And I think it brought a certain members of the audience, but not obviously to the masses. So unfortunately, I see this movie hitting streaming services very soon. I don't anticipate it making probably any more than 10 million at the end of the day, unfortunately, for the film, which I feel like there was a lot there. And I'm sure the negative word of mouth didn't help it either, because I'm pretty sure on the critics level, it's sitting at a 32, and on the audience, it's sitting at a 53. So
not great.
Yeah, it's definitely not great.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll find its footing in streaming, because like I feel like we're at that point now where like going to the movie theater is like an obstacle for people, like for whatever reason. And I think maybe when it hits streaming, like I could definitely see this being something that people watch. Like, but you'd have to be fully paying attention. Like, there's no like passively watching this. This is not like a phone in the lap, watch a movie kind of thing. Like, you need to be like paying attention.
Yeah, because there's literally 1 minute where the movie fades and you're watching a completely different story happening in front of you. Yeah, I just looked it up. I just want to make a clarification. The critic score gives it a 36%, and the audience score is at a 57% at the time of this recording. So, like, not favorable. So I can see people looking at this and like, oh, this movie sucks. So that it's unfortunate and it's all reasons that we already gave. you can kind of understand where people get to that conclusion. But I think both scores are a little too harsh. I think there's a lot of moments in here that are good. And it just, again, as we said before, kind of brought down by other elements. But Sheldon, with all that being said, your final thoughts of the movie, and something new since we've been doing since the last time you were on the show is we do a 5-star rating. So we'd like to hear your 5-star rating, and we have to do half stars as well. So your closing thoughts and then your 5-star rating.
Closing thoughts. I'm a sucker for coming of age movies and family cycles and just kind of the way that life moves. So that's what drew me into this movie. I would still recommend it, but only recommend it to certain people because, I think this does have an audience for a specific type of viewer. That said, on a scale of 5, I would give it a 3.
Okay. Ernesto, what about you?
So I kind of looked at it as a missed opportunity. There's so many good themes and the premise is a really strong premise that I just felt like this movie could have been done so much better. I appreciate him trying to go out there and really test the boundaries of this de-aging technology. And then kind of restricting himself, giving himself some restrictions, like the single camera aspect. It forces them to do things differently storytelling wise, and some of them worked out and some of them didn't. I mean, we were able to get these really deep human moments, even though we were in the aspect of a fly on the wall, where it would have been way more engaging if we were right there, next to them in the moment. But if you give us this fly on the wall perspective, the fact that there's something to be said that the fact that we were so disconnected, but yet so engaged during these moments, even with the things that were the nitpicky that pulled us in and out of the story. So, I'm kind of floating between a 2.5 and a 3, and I think I'm gonna go 3. I'll go 3 stars.
Yeah, I think that we're on agreement here because I'm also going to give it a 3 stars. I think there was enough emotional moments for me to kind of get us through that, and I think there was a lot, especially specifically with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright's character. That's the time we spent with the most in this movie, and they kind of gave us the heart and the relatability of it all, and I feel like a lot of the other moments, and also just the Tom Hanks and Robin Wright's family dynamic, even with Paul Bettany as well, that whole storyline, and even seeing the father coming back, it's also just sad to see his love for his wife in the mix. His wife dying had to lead him into no longer drink alcohol. He was an alcoholic for most of his life until his wife passed away, and then he had to put it away. No, I'm sorry. It was when his wife had the stroke. Then he decided to put the alcohol away and be devoted to her, and probably should have been doing that the entire time. And so even he had some moments that were compelling as well. And I think that all their story was the movie for me. I wish we would have focused on that a lot more. And then again, as we've been saying, unfortunately, the movie gets bogged down by 2 other elements, which was the AI, which I didn't think I needed to be in there, and then the overarching story of you being here, and that bouncing between the colonial times and the Native Americans and the inventor and the pilot is all of that served nothing to the actual plot itself, rather than just being, we're going to have fun with this idea and this fixed point through time. And that could have been a whole different movie in and of itself, but it really didn't need to be there to help us give the emotion aspect of it. So that really bogged it down. And if you took those elements out and really just focus on these characters, I think we would have had a much stronger point to it, because not only are we fixed point on this setting, we're also have a fixed point of their story. And I think that would have been all the difference in the world there. But alas, at the very least, if anything else about this movie, it's something different. Yeah. It's something different. It's something unique, and it's a nice change of pace from other movies we can see out in the theaters right now.
Agreed.
So there's that. But there you go. That's our spoiler review on here. Oh, sorry, I have one more thing. Sorry. A question for the both of you. Sheldon, I'll start with you. We were making a joke earlier in the episode of how many times we were saying here. And we also heard it a bunch of times in the movie itself. I have the number based on the internet of how many times they said it. Do you want to take a guess on what that number is? Sheldon, I'll start with you.
75.
Wow. Okay. Ernesto?
47.
Okay, I'll give you both one more chance. It's lower than that.
Okay.
On both of your numbers. You guys ran too high.
Way too high?
So one more try. I wouldn't say way
Okay,
too high,
okay.
but you guys are both over the
All right.
mark. So one more
Sheldon.
chance.
Ernesto, what was your number?
My number was 47.
Okay, I'm gonna go 30.
And I'm gonna go 21.
39 was the amount
That's
of
still
times
really
they
high.
said here. That's still really high. Yes. They said here 39 times. And there was a point where I'm watching this movie, it's like, they said it again. He said it again.
Well, there's a reason why we both started off with such high numbers, because it was said so many times.
So many times, yes.
I was close to be fair.
But anyway, yes. You were close. You were closer with the
original
with the
number.
first time you were the second time. Yes. But yes, anyway, that's our spoiler review on here. Sheldon, thank you for joining us to just talk about
everything,
what we've been watching, catching up on what you've been doing a deep dive on this one. It's crazy to hear that we have not had you on this show for over 2 years now, if not maybe 3.
Yeah.
Yes, but here's the thing, guys. I'm always so excited to be a guest on this show. So anytime you guys have something that links up organically, if you need help with Wicked and if during the spot, I'm sure you already have your people lined up for that. But if you have to call in reinforcements, no, I love that you guys do this. I love chatting with you guys. You're both so thoughtful about what you're consuming, and it's just refreshing to kind of do that. And I'm always happy to be part of this. So thank you guys for having me on here. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, I can't believe this is my 3rd time, but
well, we would love to have you back on. I always love hearing your insights. You always have such good things to say. You're just a pleasure to talk to. So anytime when you see something, because we find stuff for you, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you see something I'm gonna go see that.
March, I said Ernesto some stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, no."
I said it to him. He's like, "I'm not interested in that."
And then he would send me something, and I'm like, "No." But this was the first one where it was kismet. It just worked out that we both agreed on.
And I actually think because we just reviewed our last episode, we did the movie Saturday Night about Saturday Night Live. I actually think that you would enjoy that movie. I think that's a Sheldon movie. I think that you would really enjoy.
It's on my list because I mean, I've been watching that show off and on since I was in 3rd grade, and I love ever since I was a kid, just any type of behind the scenes look at something, even if it's a TV show or movie or something that I wasn't invested in. If HBO or whatever was doing a behind the scenes look at something, I would watch it from start to finish just because I don't know, I just eat that stuff up. I love kind of seeing how TV and movies come together.
It's definitely worth it. It was a great movie. It was way better than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And a great cast at that too. Even some of the lesser known actors, I'm impressed with who they picked.
Yeah, a lot of up and coming actors in that movie. Very similar to the nature of how SNL even got started in the first place. Yeah. But yeah, no, Sheldon, especially with the Oscar season coming up, we can definitely probably align with another movie in the short, in the not too distant future. I'm sure we can probably find a few more, or at least one more, to get you in on this Oscar season conversation.
For sure. Which one of our coworkers, and I know Matt, you no longer work with us, but which coworker, past or present, has been on the most, and how many times have they been on?
Past or present, I would say
Jacqueline.
Ooh, that's probably neck and neck.
Yeah, because I would say who we had on who's worked there the most. Because we also have Nick, who's been on the show. We have Alice, who's been on the show. We've had Jacqueline a bunch, Kellyanne a few times, Sonica a few times. So I would, if I had to guess, because Nick has also been on a few times as well, it would be a toss-up between Nick, Sonica, and Jacqueline being on the most.
Nick's been on. Nick Rivera's been on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's actually been on the most. Is 6. He's been on 6.
Oh, wow.
Sonica, I believe, is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 5. She's been on 5 times.
Okay.
And Jacqueline, I think, is 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, 6. She's been on 6 times too.
Oh,
damn!
Oh my god!
I was gonna say, I feel like Nick and Jacqueline and Sonica felt common and frequent enough, but yeah, that's interesting. That
we got to bump your numbers up, Sheldon. We got to get you.
Yeah,
they're coming.
he's like, Oh, we have a mission.
Listen, the first thing I listened to when you guys told me about the podcast, I listened to the episode with Jason, and I was like, oh, this is really cool that they do this. And then I was patiently waiting for my invitation, and then I got one from the Golden Globes, and I was super excited about that. And then you guys asked me back later that year for Dear Evan Hansen.
Yeah.
Both invitations happened in the same year, and I was just like, well, dang, I guess I didn't do a good job that they haven't brought me back.
Well, sometimes I feel like I don't want to.
I peaked in 2021 for Box Office Bingers.
Sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes I feel like I bother, so I try not to bother people. Like I gotta feel the moment out. It's like, it seems like they might be interested now. But Sheldon, I know now that you are always interested.
Yes, yeah. Maybe that was on us, and we apologize for that.
Oh,
we did not want to make you feel left out. But
not at all. I'm totally kidding. But especially because Ernesto, I think because we've worked together longer at this point, you're getting a better feel and a window into what I would be into. So we watch these Hollywood Minute packages and so forth, and I'm like, oh, I would definitely watch that. It's just a little bit easier. So by all means, I'm happy to come on, and my dog hopefully is not blending in with the green screen, but she's just all.
Oh, she's fine.
She's fine. She's fine. But yeah, I can confidently say that, especially with the award season coming out, and we know that's your jam. We're inching right into it, so we're probably going to be discussing a lot of more award season films in the next couple of weeks and into the new year. And so with that, I'm sure we can find another one, at the very least another one more to bring you on.
I didn't ask for the competition aspect. I was
no, it's happening. It's happening. It's already there. It's happening.
I'm curious. I don't want you guys to be like, oh, this dude, coming on our show, asking who else has been on.
It's too late now. We're keeping score.
Keeping score now. It's on record.
You put this into existence. We got to keep up your numbers. And look, we're not. Look, if you really want to be on the show, we're not going to stop you.
We're all for it.
You know what I mean?
Listen,
we love having guests onto the show. It's gonna. If you want this to happen, we can make this.
Put it into perspective. We're just surprised when somebody goes, "Oh yeah, I listen." They go, "Really? You actually listen? Okay, thanks."
Sometimes it's like,
past lives, because I saw past lives with my mom and my brother, and we went out for ice cream at the ice cream shop next to the Winter Park movie theater, but we drove separate cars, so we could only talk about it for so much. So I really enjoyed that movie, and I just wanted to sit in it a little bit longer. So I listened to the Box Office Bingers episode on past lives because I wanted a little bit more content.
That was a fantastic movie. It's so good.
It was
so good.
It was such a good movie. And it's kind of crazy to think about too, because the podcast itself is, like we mentioned earlier, it's very broad. We talk about a lot of different things, and I do like the fact that to your case, I'm not the big blockbuster type, but you found an appeal to be well, they also talk about the Oscar stuff too, at least in the conversation of the award contention, and that could be an avenue for other people as well. Surprisingly, our box office episodes, our Oscar predictions episodes, as well as our recaps, do surprisingly well. And it's probably because due to the fact that we do a lot of research into these movies. I was
very impressed. You guys did your homework when we did that. I think we did it for the Golden Globes in 2021, not the Oscars. But I was just impressed. And I think I'd only been at West for a few months at that point because I was just oh damn, they brought their A game. I need to bring it for Dear Evan Hansen.
Yeah, over the years we stopped putting too much focus because it just ended up being too much and also just repetitive. So we put more focus into the Oscars rather than focusing on every individual award show. And we mentioned it in our entertainment news segment, but not all right, we're doing this full coverage on it. It just became too much. And so the Oscars was just the main one we focus on now throughout the years. But I mean, as we are approaching, as we wrapping up this episode, next week we are celebrating 5 years of this podcast, and I think it's crazy to think about that we've been doing this for 5 years now.
240 episodes. 240 episodes, and an average runtime. Thank you. And an average runtime for each episode is over an hour and a half each. I think. Yes. I don't even think we have an episode that's under an hour. I think we have one that's right at an hour. Is probably our shortest one.
Yes,
and our longest one.
Yeah. I think it was 2 hours and 53 minutes or something.
2 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah, something. It's pretty long. But yeah, we're gonna kind of reminisce a little bit next week on our 5-year anniversary. It is kind of surreal to think about it, like just sticking with something for so long, for 5 years, and to say that you were on 3 years ago, it's like it's mind blowing that even to have that in a sentence.
Yeah.
But this has been a lot of fun. We don't know what we're reviewing next week. I don't think we solidified it.
There will be a show. There will be a show next week.
There will be a show next week. We will be celebrating 5 years. We're going to be talking about a movie, and it's going to be a good time. All those are guarantees. If you want more from us, you can always follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok at Box Office Bingers, our X and Letterboxd page at Box Office Binger, and our Threads and Instagram page at Box Office_Bingers. The fun doesn't stop here. It continues on all of our social media channels. So be sure to follow one, all. We're not judgy, just anyone, just one. One or all. All is preferred, but one is good enough, you know. But if all is good, then all is good for you, then it's good for us. But one is okay too. We'd like to thank Sheldon for joining us yet again. We're gonna get your numbers up, whether you wanted to or not. We're gonna get your numbers up for sure. It's gonna happen. I can't wait. Yeah, it's not gonna be 3 years before you have you back on the show. That's a guarantee. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to us or watching us. Really do appreciate it. Come back next week for more movie fun. You're not going to regret it. And for that, I've been your host, Matt Diaz.
Ernesto Santos. See ya.